Welcome, everyone, to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast. I'm a networking expert and the author of the upcoming book, No Strangers, How to Build Community, One Relationship at a Time. My why is the pursuit of mastery, and the goal of this podcast is to lock arms on a lifelong mission of daily personal growth to become the best version of ourselves. So let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the podcast. We are joined by a very special guest. He's the guitarist for the Juno Award-winning, multi-platinum, global chart-topping band Finger 11, as well as folk heroes Blackie Jackett Jr. So welcome to the podcast, Mr. Rick Jackett. Rick, what's going on, brother? Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year, man. 2022, pretty wild.
New year, new you.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I'm never really one of normally New Year's is just another night. It's like, time is sort of a construct. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really actually change the way things work. But this year, it definitely felt good to get rid of last year. You know what I mean? I enjoyed the symbolism of it this year a lot more.
So what you're trying to tell me is you spent New Year's Eve like me with pizza and tears. Is that correct?
Yeah. I spent New Year's Eve I got this nice outdoor garage here with my wood stove. So I sat out here with a beer and, just waited for the world to change, which it didn't, but whatever. I mean, honestly, I can honestly say one of my favorite New Year's traditions for the last 5 years, I would say, is staying in by myself, for a couple reasons. One, we played so many New Year's shows over the years that it's rare to be home on New Year's Eve. But in these last couple of years, I find it's something me and my friends joke about, but it's like we like to go out 24/7, 7 days a week, all year round. So sometimes going out on New Year's is a bit of a nightmare, because that's usually when what we call it the amateur drinkers, they go and they get too drunk and they get fights and they, lots of chaos and drama and stuff. And I mean, I had too many years where I was like, I just wanted to have some drinks with my buddies and it turns into some crazy. And I was like, you know what? It's best to skip New Year's. So I started doing that about 5 years ago. And you know what? I enjoy it. I do agree that it's a bit of an introspective time and a bit of a time for reflection. So doing that by yourself sometimes can be, valuable.
My experience as a musician is the New Year's Eve gigs are usually almost the highest paid ones. I mean, that's where, the corporate gigs come in, the people with a lot of money want to lock in the best band and the most memorable night. So it's actually pretty hard to turn down the New Year's gigs.
It is. For sure it is. Those are, but that's, they are fun gigs. Don't get me wrong. Like if we're playing a show, I'm always going to say yes to that on a New Year's Eve. But if we're not playing a show, I'd probably rather just stay home than be just a patron. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So this is actually the first podcast episode, the first guest interview that we have for 2022. So we finished the year with your friend Chuck Daly from I Mother Earth. It was a great episode. And we have an equally awesome episode with you here today to start the year off right. So I really wanted to thank you. It means a lot. I'm a huge fan, as you'll see over the next 2 hours, that I've been familiar with the music. I've gone to the concerts, and it means a lot to me that you were down to do this episode. So thank you.
Yeah, man, my pleasure, man. No, not a problem at all. I saw a couple of the clips with Chuck, and yeah, he's a great dude, man. He's so fun to talk to.
Amazing. I wanted to start this episode with a story that I think that you will enjoy and you'll find interesting. So back on March 8th. 2008, I'm 22 years old. My friends and I decide to do a road trip from Ottawa to Toronto, a 4-hour drive to see two of our favorite bands at Massey Hall. This is Chevelle and Finger 11. Now, on our trip, it's only 4 hours. There is suddenly a all-time record-breaking snowstorm. So I don't know if this rings a bell for you, but our
I
4 hour
remember, man.
drive was filled with cars in the ditch everywhere. Lanes were blocked. And 12 hours later, we make it to Toronto. We get to Massey Hall and we find out that Chevelle isn't playing. I'm sure they were stuck in the same snowstorm as us, maybe other reasons. So it's been a difficult ride. We don't know if we're even going to make it. We get there and one of our two favorite bands isn't even playing. We're heartbroken. So we're sitting in our seats on the floor and we look up and there's a mini drum kit on stage. So the three of us are speaking out loud, trying to figure out, oh, is there another band that's opening? Because Finger Eleven's this big rock band. And this nice woman in front of us turns around and goes, no, that's for Finger 11. And we're a little skeptical. We go, well, how,
Right.
how could you know that? She goes, well, my husband is Rick in Finger 11. And that's the day we met. That's the day we met your wife. And
Amazing.
what we went on to witness was Finger 11 opening for Finger 11. So you did an intimate acoustic set. And then you did a full blown, you brought the rock radiation, a full band Finger 11 set afterwards. And I wanted to thank you for your rock and roll heroics that day, saving what would have been a terrible day and turning it into a very memorable experience.
That's cool, man. You know what? I mean, I remember that concert, obviously from my perspective, but Massey Hall is like such an iconic, legendary venue. I'd seen so many of my favorite shows there, and we had never played there, and we were so excited for that show. It was a long time in the planning and all that stuff, and it was like how it is when you wake up the day of a gig and you never know how the universe and the vibe's going to be, and sometimes you can't do much about anything. I'll never forget that day just being like, all right, it's Massey Hall day, and opening up the curtains and just seeing the blizzard and being like, are you gotta be kidding me? And then, on our end, there was a lot of conversation all day about, do we cancel the whole thing? Do we do that? And no, I mean, as much as we were friends with those Chevelle guys, we did a lot of touring with them, and it would have been nice to have them there. But that did give us a chance to do something that we had never done up to that point, which now is sort of a commonplace thing for us because we never had usually we sort of snuck our slower songs in amongst the rockers to sort of create a bit of a flow and to the sets. But that was our first time where we actually just separated them. And we sort of found there was a bit more power in both sides of it when we did that. When we just focused on the acoustic and we didn't put it back to back, with like a rocker, it doesn't get overshadowed, and you get to sort of settle into that vibe and that groove and that scene. And then vice versa, when you do start playing the rockers, there isn't any downtime. It's just go from the second you start. So that was a really fun way of actually splitting up the songs that we had never done prior to that. But now, I mean, you can find us on any day. Like, we're pretty much just as content to do an acoustic set as we are an electric set, because we find a lot of pleasure and variation in both ways. We get to try new things. If we're sitting down, we don't have to worry about sweating and falling over our gear and jumping around. That just sort of comes out of us naturally once you take those seats away. But as soon as you put our butts in a seat, we just sort of focus in and chill and play more like we do when we're just by ourselves, right? When we're by ourselves, we're not bouncing around the walls and stuff. We're just concentrating solely on the music. Where you get us in front of this crowd, and you turn up the volume and you turn on the lights, and then that thing comes out of us. I can't tell you how many times myself or James have sat around before a set because either we're sore or hungover or whatever reason, and we're like, oh man, I think I'm going to take it easy tonight. And everybody laughs at us because they're like, yeah, you're not though. And we're like, yeah, there's no way. And then as soon as you get up there and that feeling kicks in, the adrenaline takes over, and next thing you know, it's an hour and a half later and the show's over, and I don't really remember what happened. So.
Of all the venues where you could do an acoustic set, Massey Hall is just about the best in the world. Yeah. I mean, the acoustics there are unbelievable. I've seen Ryan Adams, I've seen Death Cab for Cutie there, and them acoustic. Like, there's one guy sitting there with an acoustic guitar and singing, and it sounds like he's next to you, even if you're at the back of Massey Hall. Like, it's the way the sound carries is unbelievable.
We saw Bjork there in I can't remember if it must have been the late 90s or early 2000s. She did half her set without a microphone.
Wow.
It was just that quiet in the room, and she was that loud of a singer, and she just sang in the room. It was amazing. It was amazing. And I saw Neil Young there uh, a couple of times, but his last thing, and it was the same. It was just him and an acoustic guitar, and it was like it was pretty. So it was so intimate. So yeah. That place is insane. I love playing it. So.
So you're super passionate about music. Where did this passion for music come from? Do you have like an earliest memory of music actually meaning something to you?
Yeah. I mean, my family so no one in my family were musicians per se. So, but I had family friends that were always coming over to parties with acoustic guitars and there'd be sing-alongs and that. So I was definitely around that kind of scene growing up. My dad was a massive music fan, but just not necessarily the coolest music in the world.
How
But he
dare you?
loved
How dare
like
you?
John Denver
Yeah,
and Kenny Rogers and the Carpenters. So they weren't the Beatles, Rolling Stones, and Pink Floyd,
got
but
it.
we listened to them a lot in my house. You know what I mean? And so the music was always on, always around. And when I was probably the most important thing to answer your question, the thing that really influenced me the most was when I was around 6 years old. My parents gave me their old flip top 45 record player and like their box of 45s from when they were teenagers, which was like all early Elvis, early Beatles, like Paul Anka, Dion, like Sheldon or Del Shannon, like all these guys. And so I was allowed to have those records in my room by myself. I was allowed to close the door. If I scratched them, I was taught like you won't be able to listen to them anymore, so be careful. And so probably for the next like 5 years, that was my favorite thing to do. I would just listen and listen and listen. Like I remember the very first song I ever listened to by myself was Rockin' Robin by Bobby Day. And that song still is in my top 10 favorite songs because it just made that impression on me. Like, this is fun. Like, this is awesome. These guys are making this. These guys are singing this. And that from that point on, I just had a massive love affair with music. And one of my favorite things about discovering music that way was that the music that my parents had given me obviously wasn't cool. But I still fell in love with it. And it gave me a lesson and a understanding of music that I probably wouldn't have gone back and really spent that much time digging into in my life. So I'm very well versed in like, you know, 50s bebop music and like, this kind of stuff. And that's and now as I get older and the bands I fall in love with, you sort of learn all of them sort of somehow trail back to that early rock and roll, regardless of what they sound like now. So that was so cool discovering that style of music on my own. But then when I got to my teens and I got into like my own music, well then I was when I discovered Zeppelin and Floyd and Hendrix, the Beatles, later stuff, that all of a sudden became mine and wasn't my parents handing down to me. So I really identified with that stuff when I was listening to it and that was just one of those things that I had a lot of friends who grew up listening to that. And by the time they got to high school, they were sort of over it because to them it was their parents' music. To me, it was brand new. And so, I was getting into all that music. Then grunge hit, and it was just like, the greatest time to be a music fan.
Like
Uh,
1991.
yeah, because there was like a '60s resurgence. So a lot of those bands were like either putting out remastered, like the Zeppelin box set, and like Tom Petty come out with records, and Neil Young was putting out records again, and all these really important influence artists, you know, were sort of resurfacing. And then you had all the young grunge artists that paid a lot of tribute to these artists, gave them a lot of credit for their influences. And there was just this great rock scene, and now we know it as a historical moment, but uh, growing up through it, it was incredible. I mean, we laugh about it all the times because even when we were making the Butt Monkey record, like, there were records coming out every month and every week sometimes that were directly influencing the way we were writing and recording music. So we'd have a song that we'd be recording, and maybe the new Rage came out, you know what I mean? Or Rage for the first time came out. And then by the time we got to the end of recording that song, Tool had come out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, like, we're adding these new tricks on the guitar and new styles of writing and playing in real time into our music. As students were hearing them, you know,
Mm.
and I can hear it. If I go back, and I don't often go back and listen to the Butt Monkey record, but if I do, I can hear what we were trying to emulate and what we were heavily influenced by. And
So
that was cool.
yeah, so that would be 1992 is the Rage Against the Machine self-titled debut, and in 93 is Undertow from Tool. So that's probably
Yeah,
the time. That 92 album from Rage is my single favorite album of all time. That's number
yeah.
one.
I just bought it on vinyl, man. It is
So
phenomenal,
good.
man. And and plus back then, you had the Chili Peppers, right? Blood Sugar Sex Magic, the record is pretty much there's the reason there's a Rainbow Butt Monkey. Like,
Wow.
we were friends. We all sort of played instruments, but that record was the record that made us get together in a room to learn how to play those songs.
Hmm.
Like, sorry, my dog's here.
That's
Yeah,
your
can you hear him?
your new dog, Mike. Yeah.
Mike, yeah, he's my new farm dog, so he's singing for you. Yeah. So anyway, so that time, like, so yeah, I was a massive music fan. Growing up, went through like typical like Motley Crue phase, Iron Maiden phase, right into Metallica, and then I never was a big like hair metal guy, except Motley Crue wasn't hair metal to me. Because they were still like singing about Satan and stuff and the devil.
Hmm.
But then yeah, and then I mean, and it's never stopped. It's never stopped. It's the same, and I can honestly say everybody in the band has a different version of my story, but everybody in the band is equally in love with music in general and artists and bands that as I am. That's one of the things. One of the things we don't have a lot of musical taste in common, but our love for music and our respect for the artists that make it is what we do have in common.
So that music box you got from your parents became kind of a Pandora's box into the music world. And
100.
How did you gravitate from just music fan to musician picking up a guitar? Where does that bridge happen?
So ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to play rock guitar, wanted to play electric guitar. I wanted to be a rock star. Like that was like when I was in like grade 1 and 2, that was the thing I said to my class. Like, I want to be a rock star. I didn't know how to play any instruments. I just loved the idea of the guy in the leather jacket in a Trans Am with, being cool. I don't know. There was just this thing back then too. There was just like rock stars were really prevalent and really cool and important, right? So it was like it made me want to be that. So, but we had a piano growing up in our house. So my mom, and she's right, but it was not what I wanted to hear when I was a kid. It was like, you learn to play the piano first, and then we'll get you a guitar, right? Started testing my
Resolve
commitment
or something.
Yeah, like how much do I really want to be a musician? Because if I want to be a musician, I should learn all. So I took piano lessons and I played piano and I banged around the piano. But even then, I didn't do it properly. Like, my teacher was always giving me shit for not reading. She was like, "You're just listening," and I was always like, "Well, who cares? Like, does it sound right?" So I never really took to like the lessons and that kind of thing. Music to me was always a form of self-expression. But that was one of these things that is that squealing coming through?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's definitely coming through.
Okay, give me a second. I'm gonna.
That's all good. It's organic. You got a brand new dog.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, it is. Hey, you want?
There is proof that you have a brand new dog now. It's not hypothetical.
Yeah.
It's not a rumor.
No, he's a big one. Here, Mike, come here. I'll show you. Come here. Anyways, but yeah, like, so when I was growing up playing, playing on the piano and stuff, that after a while that sort of faded out because that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to play rock guitar, So when I was in high school, it wasn't until a buddy of mine who was a golfer had got a guitar and had it for like a couple of weeks. It was like, I don't want this anymore. And I was like, I'll buy it off you. And he was like, okay, $100. If I can give him $100, he'll give me the guitar and the amp. And what happened was I came home to my mom and I said, I need $100. I got to buy this. Said, okay, if you can raise $50, I'll give you the other 50. I already had 50 from like whatever birthdays, Christmases, whatever. So I bought that guitar that night. was like what I always wanted, you know. I got home with it and I was realized like I have no idea how to play this thing. Like I literally was like, I didn't know how to tune it. I had no idea. I just was going, but I knew that holding it and hitting the strings and was what I was waiting for, hoping for, you know. So, you know, again, I mean, pre-internet, right? So there wasn't a way to YouTube how to play the guitar. So you buy a book, how to play guitar, you know, read it over and over again, put your fingers in the right position, read it, learn how to play like Oh Susanna, you know, and then slowly and sure but surely get there. And and then for that Christmas, my parents bought me my Strat, Jimi Hendrix book of how to play Are You Experienced and the CD.
Way to
And
go,
that was
parents.
really
That's a
when
big
things,
win right
yeah,
there.
it was cool. Yeah, it was. I mean, that was a massive gift. And that was really when things changed. Because even the guitar was now mine, not a one I bought off someone. Everything about it was like, just lock yourself in a bedroom and figure this one out. And that's sort of what I did on my own for quite a while. And then when we started jamming as a band, that's when I started to flourish because James had already been playing for 10 years when we started, right?
Oh, wow.
So he was sort of my de facto guitar teacher. I was constantly just learning from him, and he was constantly, but a lot of times it wasn't verbal, it was just watching, you know, watching what he was doing. And I was like, oh, that's what that is. Oh, that's that, you know. And then that's never really stopped. We've always sort of bounced ever since, just, you know, bounced guitar playing off each other constantly. But that was a big thing though. I was a bit of a sink or swim moment. I'd only been playing for about a year. The band started and everybody was way more advanced than I was. But it was like, what are you gonna do? Not get good and not be in a band, you know? That was sort of and I also, that's all I wanted to do. At that point in my life, I realized like this is it. Like this is my path, you know, for better or for worse, or I don't know if it's gonna work or not, but and then the band just, you know, we started together and still together.
You burned the boats and you caught up with your guitar playing. The band formed in Burlington. When you think back to your hometown of Burlington, what thoughts come to mind, and how special was it for the band to go back and play the Burlington Sound of Music Festival? That's a big one. I've been to many times.
Yeah, you know what? That was what we went back in I think 2002 for the first time that we had really gone back to Burlington at all on any level since like the Butt Monkeys. We had played Hamilton and Toronto and stuff, but we played a lot of shows as the Butt Monkeys in Burlington. Then when became Finger 11 and we took off to the States, when we would come back to Canada, it would always be to Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver. You know, we never came back and just played in Burlington. So when we played in 2002, that was massive. That was a massive concert. It was at the time that was like the first year that Burlington Sound of Music went from like a local concert to like a big concert. You know what I mean? And they went from like having like maybe a couple thousand people to like I think it was like 60,000. It was a crazy turnout. It was I think back then I might even have been free, right? Still, so it was a massive, one of the biggest crowds we've ever seen in our lives, and it was in Burlington. You know, that was insane. That was insane because we were all like growing up in Burlington was really a great place to grow up, you know, but it wasn't a super cultured place. You know, it was mostly like a sports based kind of city, you know, so hockey, massive hockey town. They had like the Golden Horseshoe tournament every year, and you know, just there was so there wasn't a lot of like places for people who didn't want to do sports to go. And there wasn't a lot of things to do either, right? So it slowly started. A guy named Scott Kish, who was in a band called Glee, and then Scion Spheric became that band. Like that was where they sort of grew into after he passed away. But he was a big part of organizing and starting a local music scene by just I think he literally went around to some bars and said like, would you let our bands play? And no one would. In this one place in Waterdown called the Kirk House, they said yes. I don't know why they said yes.
Shout out
they
to
said
the
yes
Kirk
they
House.
What's that?
Shout out to the Kirk House.
Oh yeah, man. If there was no Kirk House, there would be no Rainbow Butt Monkeys. Like it was a massive part of our scene. So for about 6 weeks straight, every weekend, 5 bands, 3 bands would get together and play there. And it was like, it was awesome because there would be like, there'd be like a Tool band and there would be like a Jane's Addiction band. And we would be sort of like the Chili Pepper Pearl Jam band. And there would be like a Tragically Hip band. And they weren't all cover bands. They were just influenced by those styles. Do you know what I mean? And so when you, and also what it did, it was created for the first time ever, it created a scene for all the guys and girls that didn't want to be in sports, you know what I mean? And they had a place to go and be with like-minded people. And it became really important for that, for the people that were going there and for that area. But what it did for us was allowed us to just constantly be playing with other bands that were good quality and just be making fans and just sort of get the groove going before anybody was really even watching. The only people who were paying attention were the other bands and the people in the room. We had never talked to any record labels. We had never talked to any radio stations. There was no one in the world knew this scene even exists. They still don't know it existed, but it did. And it was a big part of what made us into the band, for sure.
So I had mentioned that the last podcast guest that we had was Chuck Daly from I Mother Earth. When I let him know that you were going to be our first guest, he had some kind words that he wanted me to share with you. So this is from Chuck Daly. He says, Rick is the best, the absolute best ever, a beautiful musician and a beautiful human being, an intense writer and intense performer. Rick shares love. Rick promotes kindness. I'm so lucky to have made music, performed with, and shared countless joints across the country with this incredible dude. Thanks, Rick. I truly do love you. So that's from Chuck Daly. That might be the kindest words I've ever heard someone say to another human being. I don't even know what that feels like to receive something like that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, well, coming from Chuck, that he is, I could almost use that description for Chuck. Right, you know, he is all those things as well. And but me and Chuck, yeah, we really got on well on that tour. We shared the side, like when all the bands got together to play the songs together. Me and Chuck shared that side of the stage together, and that was a lot of fun. We'd always be looking at each other, laughing and smiling, trying not to run into each other, you know. But like, yeah, no, he's an incredible man. Like, he's not just an incredible musician, but just and all around, just that kind of spirit that definitely on tour, man, is very important. You know, I'm not like, maybe he saw me on all my good points of the day, you know, but I can definitely I can get upset on tour. I can get annoyed with things, you know, and so he strikes me as Chuck. I've never seen Chuck in a bad mood. I've never actually seen Chuck not smiling, which is incredible. You know what I mean? So yeah, I love him too. I love you, Chuck.
Amazing. I have tickets for March in Ottawa, the I Mother Earth comeback show, where they have both singers. They have Edwin and Brian performing the entire discography. So I'm excited.
That's wild, man. What a cool idea. I mean, and how cool of those guys to be, you know, just adults in the whole situation. You know what I mean? Like it's great that they just are able to see the greater good and get together for the fans and for the music and sort of give, you know, the fans the ultimate experience, really. So it should be great.
It'll be awesome. There's a couple Toronto dates as well. I think the first one sold out, so they added another one. So they're going fast. And hopefully with the pandemic where they keep cutting, you know, the concerts down 50% and nothing over 1,000. And, you know, hopefully in the next few months, we go back to a new normal that's a little better. But if we dive back into the start of the Rainbow Butt Monkeys, how early on did you guys know that you had something special, or did you not know and you were just doing what you loved and you just happened to find success early?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think we were naive enough and young enough and excited enough to think we were really special. You know what I mean? Like, I think everybody thought that, but we believed in it. We thought, like, we just believed in the power of bands, right? And we knew that if the 5 of us get together and make music and we do it properly, it shouldn't sound like anything anybody's ever heard before, because that's the whole point of making music. So when we made the Butt Monkey record, probably more than ever in our life, there was a bit of an agenda to make something that totally didn't fit in with the Canadian music scene. Because at the time, we weren't big fans of the Canadian music scene because it was a lot more folk and alt folk country kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And we were 16-year-old kids that loved, you know, grunge music, and there wasn't like when we flipped on Much Music, there wasn't bands that from Canada that we were like connecting with. You know,
Canadian bands seem to have to go to the US to break, right? Which is
they did,
sad.
and well, at that time especially because there was, and nothing against these bands, but there was like the big bands were like Spirit of the West, the Tractors, Grapes of Wrath, and they're all amazing bands. But as a 16-year-old kid who's trying to learn the electric guitar, they're not the kind of bands you want to be like. You know what I mean? So our favorite bands were all from America. And so when we made our music, it was definitely influenced by that scene, not our local scene, which in itself made us stand out from the local scene because we weren't part of anybody's scene. So that in that sense, we definitely felt like we were doing something right because people were reacting to it. But I wouldn't say, but it all happened fast too for us, right? We went from like making our demos to being signed really fast. So once we got signed and Circles came out and went on Much Music and it went number one on rock radio in Canada, like I don't think we realized how special that was in the moment. I think we honestly thought that's just how it works, right? Like and again, just because of our own naive belief system, like we're like, okay, that's what you do. You make a band, you write a song, you put it out, people like it. You know, like it wasn't, there wasn't this feeling of like, yeah, we did it. It was more like, okay, cool, let's keep doing this, you know? And now in hindsight, obviously I know how special that was and how immediate it was. But at the time, it just sort of, it sounds weird, but it just sort of made sense to us because that's what we wanted to do. You know what I mean?
So how does a young band from Burlington that is playing very unique music catch the attention of a major label like Mercury that signed you guys and released your first album? How where do those dots connect?
It's simple, man. 97.7 Rock Search. The 97.7 Rock Search. I think it was the 94 or 93, maybe 93. Anyways, so that was crazy because we had just only made 2 songs and one of them was Circles. So we entered it into the Rock Search. It got picked as a finalist. But the bands we were against at the time were all bands that we knew from the local scene, and they were all older and more established in the local scene. So we were pretty intimidated. And then we went, we get picked as a finalist, and we all went for dinner, all the bands, and we picked a number out of a hat to get the order, you know. And that's where I think that's where like luck was on our side that day because we picked the number and we got to go last, and that really played in our favor because like any concert, like the first band, there was not a lot of people there, everybody was sober, so no matter how good they were, it just doesn't come across, right? And then by the time we went on, everybody was hammered and everybody's in a great place. And we came out and we're like these young kids and we're jumping around and we're going nuts. And then we ended the whole night with Shamrocks and shenanigans. And the place was crazy. It was like it was a Rainbow Butt Monkey. You know what I mean? But you almost forgot it was a competition still. But by the end of the night, it was just, we made all these fans in the room. And the crazy thing about it is that now you look back, the judge panel was like 6 A&R guys from different labels. Like it was a total show. Like it was like a showcase. It wasn't to try and win the champion. Like it was like, that was I think the winning prize was like 10 grand in like recording time, but really the grand prize was playing for 6 labels.
Wow.
So we went in on Thursday or Friday, no one from any record label knowing who we were. And on Monday, we're getting like literally 4 offers from all the majors in Canada. We don't even have a manager. We didn't have an agent or a manager or anything. We just had the band, and so it just sort of came out of nowhere and it happened so fast. And then, so that's sort of where, like, if 97.7, no question, was the reason that we got discovered. I mean, it might have happened in another way somewhere down the road, But winning that rock search, or even being part of that rock search, was a massive catalyst for the entire career. So.
And what was it like to have the success of singles like Circles and As Far As I Can Spit right out of the gate? Like first single goes to number one on rock radio, like you mentioned.
Wow.
What is the feeling? I mean, it felt great to win the competition. It felt great to get signed, but to hear that song on the radio and hear it a lot and have a fan base that's growing, what did that mean to you as the first taste of success?
Well, a couple things. We were still in high school, right?
That's so crazy.
So we literally went back to high school after winning the competition.
Were you high school
and
heroes?
That was, yeah, like in our own way. If we weren't heroes, we were definitely like getting stared at more in the hallways and stuff. You know what I mean? Like we definitely had got the attention of everybody at this point, even people didn't, you know, and loving support and attention, like no jealousy, no like anger, no, like everybody was just like, right on, guys. Like we were part of the community and they were rooting for us, and they always did. They never stopped rooting for us. Burlington sort of always had our back, like, and so that was crazy, right? Because like we were kids still, like, you know, we weren't legally old enough to drink, and we all came to school with a massive hangover that day because we were in the VIP section drinking champagne all night, you know. So, but it was noticeably different, I guess is the best way I can put it, from between me and my friends. And just obviously, you know how it is. There was no financial change in our lives, right? Like you don't make money from being in a band, especially in Canada with one single, you know. So there wasn't like that kind of change, but notoriety and just, you know, like silly things like Burlington had a massive bar scene, right? Like there was bars everywhere, and it was the thing to do. Cheap picture night at Emma's, or cheap, you know, cocktail night somewhere. And everybody had fake ID. Everybody would get in, you know, and the lineups were like 2 hours long. Like it was crazy, right? Like you know, you wouldn't go some days because it's like, oh shit, look at the lineup. And I started getting to skip the lineup. You know what I mean? Like that was one of the
That's
first.
The
like,
true VIP experience of being
like,
in a successful
you know, like I'm
band.
young, like I'm not even old enough to drink in the bar. Most of the people in the line know this about me. Most of the bouncers probably even knew it. But meanwhile, I'm getting to go to the front of the line, like with as many friends as I wanted to bring in. You know what I mean? And go right in and go right to the bar and get free drinks. And like that kind of lifestyle started early. And those kind of perks, you want to call them, they started early. And that was like, oh, I can get used to this. So that was about it, though.
So your very first album comes out, you're still in high school, and you get your first Juno Award nomination. So for the listeners here from the States, the Junos are the equivalent of the Grammys. So what did it mean to have your country recognize your talents that first time?
That was wild. I mean, no question. Like, again,
that was like breakthrough artist or best new artist.
Breakthrough artist, like yeah. And again, there was a little bit of that. Of course, like this is how it goes. Like we were so excited to be doing it. We just thought this was, I can honestly say, I think we thought this was the typical musical experience. Like once you get signed, then you get a single on the radio, and then you go to the award shows. Like I just think that's what we thought all bands did. And because it was happening to us, like why would we think anything different? Because we didn't think we were special. We just thought this is how the band ride goes. You know what I mean? So. But that Junos I'll never forget, because we had to get dressed up, which in butt lucky terms is not really a thing. But we wore basically different clothes than our stage clothes. And but what the coolest thing about that was we were signed to the same label as Shania Twain, and that was Shania Twain's big year. Like she was the massive star globally, and she was gonna win a bunch of awards that night. But the day of the Junos, she came down with like a flu or something, and like she was in town in the hotel, but she had to cancel because she just couldn't keep, you know, she was sick, right? So we got her seats.
Wow.
So if it's funny, like we're in the front row, like where all the camera pans by, right? Because that's where they have all those A-list celebrities. But because Shania Twain couldn't make it and Mercury had bought tickets, like we were the only late. other band there. They gave it to the Butt Monkeys. So it's like it's all this like Canadian rock royalty and these 5 unknown teenagers that are dressed like pretty wacky. And it was fun, man. I mean, everybody was so friendly and just like everybody's always been so open to the band. I don't know if it's just because we disarmed a lot of people with the name Rainbow Butt Monkeys, whatever it was. People just always sort of invited us to the party. So
the name had an effect like the Bare Naked Ladies, where people, it caught the attention, and then they got to check out the music. I remember Shania Twain hosting the Juno several years later, and she had this skit where she was going through the crowd, and she walked by the Swollen Members, the rap group from Vancouver, and she walks by them, and she pretends to fall on them and catches herself. And I remember her saying, "Oh my God, I almost fell on a swollen member." So I remember that was a moment that stood out. Shania, you dirty girl.
That's pretty funny, man.
So after that album is released with the Rainbow Butt Monkeys, you guys go through some transition. So you transition from the name Rainbow Butt Monkeys to Finger 11. You transition the sound from more of a funky sound to a little more of an edge with Finger 11. You record this amazing album called Tip, and shortly after you release Tip, you get dropped by your label, only to get picked up by Wind Up Records, which was massive in the US. What were the highs and lows of that transition with all those things going on around that Tip album?
Yeah, that was a pretty intense time. I mean, there was, it was like a lot of change happening as individuals. Just simply because we were literally going from our teens to our early 20s, you know what I mean? And your sort of perspective changes and your mindset changes about the world and the universe, not just your band and the music. But so as the individuals changed, it inevitably changed the band dynamics and the band philosophies and everything. So we started by just writing for the next record. And it became pretty clear within maybe 2 songs that no one in the band was interested in doing funky stuff anymore. But that never really crossed our mind as a problem to us. That was just because we loved the Beatles and we loved Zeppelin and we loved Floyd and we loved anybody. And so most of our bands, it was very common to be like, you sound like this one day, you sound like this the other day. That was almost the recipe we were following. You know what I mean? We didn't want to just continue the same record over and over again. So when we started writing and we were like, okay, well, we just made a musical conscious choice to be like, let's drop D and get rid of our wah-wah pedals for now and just sort of write riffs and that kind of thing, versus writing grooves or, whatever. So as we started writing, it just got darker, and Scott's lyrics got darker, the melodies got darker, his voice got heavier. There was just these things happening that was just a natural evolution, for the band. Then at some point we met Arnold Laney. That was a big thing for us because we were massive fans of Arlie Peace's first record, and he had just had massive success with Clumsy. So there was this holy, let's get together with him. And when he got together with us, he saw the potential in what we were trying to do and saw the value in leaving behind what we'd already done. And that was where we started. That was one of the things that we were really on the same page. We weren't sure what we were, because we hadn't written many, I don't know if we'd written any finished songs before we started work with Arnold. But we had written riffs, we had half songs, we had chunks and stuff, but he was because that's when we started writing with Arnold, from day one. He was in the room whenever anything was written, right? So we just started writing, and then it changed. But it was going that way anyway. If anything, I think Arnold probably saved it from being just heavy. He's probably the guy that probably said, "You guys don't forget, you guys throw melodies in here," because at the time Korn started to come out, and there was just this massive change in the type of aggression that people were putting into their rock music, so that was a big, he was a massive on that record, obviously. 6. But then when we made the record, again, we were making it. We had become somewhat aware during the making of the record that we couldn't be calling it the Rainbow Monkeys. But when we made that record, we kept everybody at bay. So the record label wasn't there during the making of it. The managers weren't there during the making of it. So no one knew what it sounded like. They were just going off Arnold's reputation and his word. So he was very good at getting on the phone, promising everybody what they wanted to hear, then coming back to us and us making the record we wanted to make. You know what I mean? And that's what we ended up doing. So, but as we were making it, we knew like this can't be called Butt Monkeys because it doesn't make sense. And we also realized that at this point in our career, like we're on to our second record, people know who the band is. We're like, if we want to do this for as long as we're hoping to do this, none of us want to be like 40-year-old Butt Monkeys. Like that was just we knew we were smart enough to know that in our 20s that like if this succeeds, that's not a good thing if we stick with this name, because eventually we're going to hate this name, and we don't hate it anymore because we just sort of stopped it in its tracks and said, okay, that was our high school band, that was our music we made. It all made total sense to us. But when we told our management and they told the label, they were like, this is not a good idea, guys. And we were like, well, it's happening. You know what I mean? Because it just, the band knew it had to happen. So then we pretty much made the bulk of Tip without a name, you know? Like we didn't know what we were going to be called. We just knew we weren't going to be called the Rainbow Monkeys anymore. And then when we played the president of the label, the record, and I'll never forget he quoted, like his quote was, I don't hear any singles, but fuck it, let's put it out. Because he thought it was good music. And it was a really cool thing. It was a really 90s thing to do. And it was very brave. And he just knew like none of these songs are going to get on Canadian radio because of what, because again, like I was saying, like what was happening at Canadian radio wasn't heavy, right? So, but he let us put it out. And we put it out, and I don't even know if we did a press release about the name change. Like we couldn't have done it worse the way we just transitioned. We just transitioned, and we didn't really tell anybody what we were doing. You know what I mean? And for years, there was people waiting for a second Rainbow Butt Monkey record. They never knew, and I don't blame them because we never told them. It was like, oh yeah, by the way, that's us. We're over here now. We're doing this. So, but it made total sense to us. Yeah, it just did. And so when we put it out, that president retired about a week later. Mercury Polygram got bought by Universal. They said, we signed the Rainbow Butt Monkeys, not Finger 11. This music's never going to get on the radio in Canada. It's not selling any records. And we were like, I just remember like they didn't drop us the option to take the record, which I thought was, they didn't have to do that. They could have shelved the record. So that was nice. But I'll never forget, we were rehearsing the new songs. And Scott got a call that the phone was for him at the rehearsal place. He came back in, he's like, guys, we just dropped. And we were like, holy shit. And I remember him, like, I started thinking, like, what are we going to do now? Like, what do we do now? And I remember him saying, like, I think this is when most bands break up. And we were like, well, we were all in agreement, like, we're not going to break up. We're just going to find out how to do this next, because it felt hopeless. Because at that point, we'd always been signed as long as we were a band. So we had forgot that it's our band and we're in charge of it. We felt like without the label, we can't do this. You know what I mean? And that wasn't the truth. And that was the biggest lesson we learned at a young age was, holy, this is only up to us. No one else, they all have their own agendas. They all have their own reason for wanting us to sell records or be popular. We have to have our own reason for wanting this band to succeed and wanting this band to be, heard by people. And that really, after that, was one of those things that just like really solidified the whole Finger 11 thing. And we never really looked back after that.
It's so crazy how so many things in the music industry can be out of your control. I mean, you guys had success with your first album. You record and release this amazing album. I mean, Tip is solid all the way through. I listen to it all the time. You have amazing songs like Above and Tip and Awake and Dreaming and all those. And then, the person that was excited about you at your record label leaves. That label gets bought out and suddenly you have no cheerleader that's still there,
Yeah.
that's vouching for you guys. It's so insane that all the things that have to fall into place for a band to be successful is unbelievable. So, I mean,
Yeah.
you went through that moment of getting dropped, and then you get picked up by Wind Up Records, so things work out. But when you look over the entirety of your career now, with how much success and this crazy single and this album platinum, and like having lived through that one moment that had nothing to do with you, where you get dropped and you don't know if you're going to stay together, does that help you now to see in the entirety of your career and your success how unlikely it is, despite how talented you guys were, despite how good the music was? It's unbelievable.
Yeah. It does, man. Well, I think one of the things that sort of concreted, or it forced us to live by what was sort of becoming our mantra, was like, and Arnold sort of taught us this. It's like, listen, you make the music that you think is good. If it's good enough, or if it's as good as you think, it might still take 20 years for people to appreciate it, but it will eventually be appreciated and remembered as good music. If you try and make a song to be popular tomorrow, it might be popular tomorrow, but will it be popular in 20 years? He sort of taught us this kind of philosophy that, like, you really got to get behind whatever you're doing, because you got to believe in it. If you don't believe in it, no one else is going to believe in it, right? So we really took that, and that's how we made Tip, with all that kind of like extra kind of, just doing exactly how we wanted to do it. And so when we got dropped, because we'd already adopted this mentality, we knew, or we were convinced that they were wrong. Like, we're not wrong. We made this awesome record. You're wrong for dropping us. Which, looking back, that's pretty arrogant for a bunch of young kids to have. But that was the fault. If we didn't feel that way, then we weren't believing in what we just created the way we thought we had just created. Like, that was the belief system. Now it was being put to the test. And it was like, okay, this is how we believe them. Let's go find someone to put this record up and screw these guys. Like, they'll regret this one day. And we actually heard from the guy that dropped us that later on in his career, he was sort of like, I don't think he stays up at night regretting it, but he acknowledged somewhere to someone that we know that it was a mistake, And that was a nice feeling too. But we already knew that, because
You're the one that got away.
Honestly, if that guy came over to me today, I would probably get down on my knees and thank him, because if we had stayed stuck to that Mercury Canadian only release contract, we were probably stuck for 5 more records. We would never have had the success that if we had dropped and gone and got signed directly into the States. Like, that was the biggest game changer of our whole career. And we weren't allowed to get out of the contract. We were signed to them. So if they hadn't voluntarily dropped us, we would have been stuck in a thing that a lot of Canadian bands get stuck in, where you're not allowed to sign to the States now, but they're not going to market you in the States because our market is Canada. So
you're stuck in purgatory, which is horrible.
It happens, right? And so for us, we got freed from that by this guy not believing in us. So it was like, I don't know, it worked out great. I mean, because then we went directly from a situation where we didn't have any belief in the band other than the bandmates themselves, to an entire community that not only believed in us, but like propped us up and cheered us on, and like became friends and fans. And all of a sudden we had other bandmates that we all of a sudden had a scene that we had never been part of a scene before. And we had other bands that we were constantly touring with, and like all these, and the Wind Up, for whatever you think of the music, the bands that were successful at the time, you have Creed, you have Evanescence, and you have Seether, and these bands were all selling like crazy amounts of records. And I felt like every week we'd be invited to New York for another like double platinum party for Creed, and then next week it'd be like in Florida for another double platinum party for Evanescence. And we'd be constantly just partying with these people, selling. And eventually, when your label's that small, it has I remember hearing the story with Epitaph when Offspring started selling records. The money has to go somewhere, right? So it trickles down, and bands like our band at the time, who weren't selling many records, got tour support, got buses, got a real shot, because the community was so tight knit, and it was amazing. It was an amazing time. It was really cool. And again, if we hadn't got dropped from Mercury, we would never have experienced it. So
It's crazy how when you look back on your life, some of the most heartbreaking moments that were devastating end up being a blessing, just like you've explained
yeah,
with that moment. I so following the release of Tip, you guys began to audition for a new drummer, and I have a quote here I think you'll like. This is from someone that auditioned for Finger 11 during the Tip era. Are you ready for this?
okay,
So this is from Neil Sanderson, the drummer from
oh,
3
amazing,
Days Grace,
yeah,
multi-platinum mega band 3 Days Grace. This is what he has to say. I think you'll like this. Tell Rick that 3 Days Grace started as a Finger 11 ripoff band. I'm still pissed that they didn't pick me as their drummer after the tryout when they found out I was only 17. I drove all the way to Burlington with only a G1 license. I thought my life was over. Also, tell him I still have no idea how he can have his guitar completely above his head and still sound in tune and heavy as fuck. I miss those dudes. 3 Days Grace, Neil Sanderson. I think things worked out for him as well, though.
yeah. Well, yeah, we've actually had a few jokes with Neil over the years, but like, well, okay, let me tell you what happened. So Neil, like, so we tried out about 30 drummers, I think, in that period, about 30, 35, and all we wanted was them to learn Tip. We didn't want to do Butt Monkeys. We didn't want to jam White Room. We didn't want to. We just said like learn 3 of these songs off this record, any 3, come in and we'll play it, right? And I was blown away by how many people couldn't do it. If they got the parts correct, the groove wasn't there. You know what I mean? If they had a groove, they'd be constantly missing the shots or the timing. And Neil comes in and like nails it. And he has that wicked open hand stance. So we were like, oh, this guy's awesome, right? He was 17, but that wasn't the factor of, I don't think, why. Because then Rich came in and he was another guy that nailed it. So Rich was left-handed. He nails it with energy. Neil's open. He nails with energy. Those were our 2 callbacks.
Wow.
Okay. Rich shows up on the day, and a guy named Neil shows up on the day with the wrong Neil. Our manager called the wrong Neil. And not only did we not get awesome Neil Sanderson to come back and decide out of these 2 awesome drummers who we're going to pick, the guy that they called back was like one of the worst guys. So he shows up and we're like, what are you doing here? We sort of even had like a bit of a conflict with him last time because he told us we were playing it wrong. And we were like, we're not playing it wrong, dude. Like, we literally just wrote this music.
It's our song.
You got it wrong. You're like, don't, like, what a weird thing to do. But anyways, so this guy shows up and we're like, oh, man. And we're like, okay. And he's like, well, I'm here. I might as well sit up. And we're like, we know in our heads, like, this guy is not going to get the gig, but he's not wrong. He drove all the way here. Like, all right, sit up. We go through half a song. We're like, okay, stop, buddy. This is not, you're not. And that was a big piss off because Neil was really, obviously the world knows now, he's a special musician, special drummer. We had no idea at the time what kind of writer he was, but he's just, he was awesome, great dude. Rich was there. Rich sits down and nails it again, like with bombastic, massive energy and just like, holy moly, this feels amazing. And it was just simply like, let's just call it then, man. Like, that's the fate. That's just the world works. Like, I don't know why that happened, but this guy is here and he's awesome. And we like him. This guy's got the job. You know what I mean? And like you just said, and we've joked with Neil before, like he should be thanking us the way that we thank the Mercury guy. You know what I mean?
It does feel like fate now, actually, with everything he's accomplished. I mean?
It's incredible because look where he ended up, and it's cool. And they are they've never been shy us about the influence of the band on their early records for sure. Like that's sort of like a best known secret, amongst us. But like that's a compliment. And I mean, like I think about that all the time because if you think about it, because we get people saying it to us like in a snarky, right? And we're like, man, we were never going to make another Greatest of Blue Skies. Like we never were. We're never are. It's just not. I don't even know how you would do that if you wanted to. But they took that record and evolved it into a different sound. And I think that's the coolest thing. Like that's such a compliment to our band, and it's great for the fans who love that genre of music, Um, and they weren't ever going to get it from us. So to me, it's sort of like a perfect kind of world. And now they're obviously that was early 3 Days Grace. Now like 3 Days Grace is their own massive entity. They're like you can hear them a mile away when you put the radio on. Like who it is, and it's awesome. Like I love those guys.
What's funny is I actually edited the end of his quote because I didn't know what he was talking about. And he actually said they called the wrong Neil in his quote.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know what that meant. So,
Right.
so I kept it out. But he
Amazing.
actually said they called the wrong Neil. So he's
aware. Yeah, that was
of,
it. The age, I remember having a conversation about his age, but thinking we can work around that, you know what I mean? But it was the real reason was because he called the wrong Neil, and Rich was there, and we were tired of looking for drummers. It had been about a month, and it was just like, okay. But Rich also, I mean, come on, he came in and,
killed it.
Killed it, yeah.
When I was 14, I went to Canadian Music Week in Toronto, and I saw Mudvayne, who are all crazy musicians. I saw Mudvayne. I think it was at Cool House, which I don't believe exists anymore. But and this unknown 3-piece band, these young guys opened, and it was 3 Days Grace, and it was just a few months before I Hate Everything About You came out, and platinum, all that stuff. So I saw them super young. I got to see Neil do his thing, come into his element. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah, I mean they were going for like I remember meeting them when they were young, like right after Neil had started it up, so I mean I couldn't be happy for those guys. They deserve it. They work hard and they are talented and they write great songs, and they just deserve all the success that they have.
So he mentioned, he has no idea how you have your guitar over your head, you're throwing it around your neck, and yet it sounds like you're just there playing the guitar normally. So I wanted to know, because I've seen you do it in person. What's the trick? How do you do such crazy things with the guitar and not miss anything? Are you landing in like the pauses in the music? How does that work? I mean, a magician shouldn't give his magic away, but I'm allowed to ask.
You know what? No, yeah. I mean, I don't mind talking about it. It's like I don't really have an answer, only simply because I think my biggest thing is not thinking about it. It's the best way I can describe it. Like it evolved from a couple of things. I grew up learning to play the guitar, watching Jimi Hendrix VHS tapes, right? So I'd be watching him and I'd be mimicking his fingers, but obviously I'm watching live at Monterey and he's playing behind his head and he's playing between his legs. And so from like that second I put a guitar on my body, I've always loved guitar theatrics, I've always loved that. But it's not, you can't do it with the first time you play a guitar. So it takes some time, but then we were just, I mean, a lot of it has, and then I also as a young guy, I love skateboarding. I was a skater when I was a teenager. So there's a bit of that too, that feeling of like starting a trick and pulling it off. There's a bit of that I loved as a skater, that feeling of like, there's a moment of starting it and then there's a moment of landing it. And that was that I love that feeling. So we played so many shows that just over the years and years and years and years and years of playing, it evolved into many different things. And obviously seeing other artists was, I remember, I'll never forget seeing the guy Yannick from Iron Maiden. And he was the first, like I'd seen guys do like the guitar spin, but it was always, like you said, in a break. It was always like, da 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 da, da 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 da, and he was the first guy I ever saw hit an open D and do it. Like he hit the open D and he spun it and it rang out and he caught it. And I was like, that's amazing. Like that's entertaining, because that you can make sense of the other parlor trick. This one was like, what? He's playing and he's spinning, like, but he's picking the right moments. So that became a thing for me. The guitar spinning was fun, and I found it, the physics of it, it's sort of like a hula hoop. Like, I mean, it's just a matter of conviction. It's more every guitar, the weight distribution of the guitar has to stand still and it'll go do its thing, just catch it, right? But like an SG where all the weights at the top of the headstock, that ain't gonna spin around your body. That's just gonna, the middle's gonna stay here and the headstock's just gonna swing around like this. And I know that because I tried it on stage before. Like, you know, that's the other thing. I've never tried any of this stuff in my garage or by myself. Like I don't practice throwing my guitar around.
You'd have a lot of broken stuff in your man cave there.
And I would just feel stupid. I mean, I probably wouldn't do it if this was something, because that would go into like the thinking about it. I mean, that means like I think it's cool and I think it's something that I should do right. And really what it is my own version of expression. And like I said, like that feeling of skateboarding and pulling off tricks. And the reason I play in tune and on time is because the other guys wouldn't allow it to not be. Do you know what I mean? Like if I was throwing my guitar around and it looked cool, but it sounded like shit, those guys would be like, stop throwing your guitar around. Do you know what I mean? Like, of course they would. I would be like that too. I'd be like, it might be fun to do, but it's ruining the musical experience, you know? So there was sort of that pressure on myself always, like, if I'm going to do this ridiculousness, then it's still got to sound good, you know? And then over the years, it just evolved. And now I do things that, like, a lot of the times the things I do happen by accident once, and I continued to do it. That's really how a lot of it evolved into what, like that thing where I hold up the guitar with one hand, that was because my strap came up. And then once I sort of, my brain was like, oh, you can do this. Well, that means you can do it all the time. You know what I mean? Muscle memory and stuff. So that's sort of how it evolved. But I'm glad it's fun to watch, because it's a lot of fun to do. You know, when I see myself doing it, I don't like to see it. It's just like, I'm like, I don't know if I would enjoy another guy doing that. I don't know if I think that's cool, you know, but when I'm on stage, I don't think about that stuff. It just comes out. It just happens. You know, but when I do think about it, I mess it up. Guaranteed. I'll guarantee you. If I do think about, like, even if I think, are you going to do that this time? I'll mess it up and I won't do it, because that means I already thought too much about it. That means my conscience is thinking that, you know, it's just a matter of going with the flow. And the other thing too, I don't know if this is the case for everybody, but for me, time on stage moves at like a crawl. So I feel like I'm constantly, the world's in slow motion and I'm in real time. So that's good when I'm trying to perform, but it's hell when I'm for anxiety. So a lot of times, a lot of this performance side of it came from a desire to, like, entertain myself, keep myself busy, so I'm not thinking about what I'm actually doing in life right now in front of all these people. You know what I mean? So the key for me is to not think about what I'm doing, and that's my way of distracting myself, I guess.
Your secret is you have a superpower where you go into bullet mode from the Max Payne games, or you go into the Matrix, and you're seeing time move slow.
And you know what? There's some, yes, you're absolutely right. Like, that's what it feels like in my mind. And I think one of the hardest things about being either a performer or a live musician is that nothing else in the world gives me that feeling. There's nowhere else in the world I can go to get that feeling. So if I don't get on stage, like I haven't for 2 years in the pandemic, my brain is like, I don't get that Zen moment that no matter what else I do, I can't find that real true Zen moment that I get on stage. And so when I am on stage, that is a real, that thing, the zone or whatever you call it, that thing you're sort of searching for in your day-to-day life. I do find it when I'm on stage, and that's what I choose to do with it. Throw my guitar on.
And up next, you release Grace of Blue Skies, 3 massive singles with Drag You Down, First Time, Bones and Joints. I mean, that's such a powerful trifecta of singles. I mean, there's such focus there and atmosphere. It's your first gold album in Canada, which is huge. I'm sure at this point you start headlining your shows, so you have, you know, most of the fans in front of you are there for you now. You have longer set times. What do you account for that amazing period of songwriting? Was there something special? Was it the new drummer? What was it? More confidence as a band after past success?
I think a couple things. Definitely there was definitely some confidence. Definitely Rich. That Rich was he had such a creative brain for drumming, and he just at that moment in time there was just all this like firing on five cylinders, you know. Plus the music scene had changed again, you know, from like the grungy kind of world to like the new metal-y kind of world, you know. Production, a lot of studios had changed. What you could do in a studio had changed, you know. But for us, I think the thing we talk about, if we talk about that record, I don't know why it turned out the way it did, but it was definitely the hardest record we ever made. Like we now look back at it with like a bit of disdain because it was a very unpleasurable experience making that record. It
In
was
what
just
way?
constant. There was just a lot of tension, a lot of frustration because also at the time, remember our career wasn't going the way that all the people thought it was going to. Like at this point, everybody thought we were going to be selling millions of records, and we were selling hundreds of thousands of records, which to us is like unbelievable, but to them is like, why aren't you doing what Creed's do? You know what I mean? So there was this pressure to make singles, but we were still very much like, we don't want to do that. You know what I mean? Like we don't want to try and guess what people are going to do with it. Like we don't want to play the guessing. We never have, don't want to. So the writing was intense because we knew there was an importance to it, but there was also this, like, there was just a lot of tension with the band. I don't know if it was just because we had been touring so much. We were all partying a lot. There was a lot of drinking and stuff. And there was just a lot of like, you know, I don't know what it was, but there was a lot of tension. It was a very dark period for Finger Eleven. You know, and it shows. I mean, you can hear the record. Like that's exactly what came out of it. But I think all those things come into play to make it the record it was, you know. But I think there's a reason why we haven't tried to duplicate it because none of us as people want to go through that. Like, you know, it was too. Every day was like, are we breaking up? Are we not? Are we making a great record? Do we hate this record? Do we hate each other? Do we love each other? Like every day was just like there was so much uncertainty, and we were constantly changing the songwriting. So we might have the song tracked and then redo the whole song. Like there was just all this constant uncertainty, but there was this desire to make something special. And our musical tastes at that time were getting shattered as well. We weren't all like, up until that point, we were sort of all in agreement what was cool. And now at this point in our lives, we're like starting to really branch off from what we thought each other's musical tastes were cool, you know? So that was happening. And there was this inner fight of like, how heavy can we be and how melodic should we be? You know, there was constantly like an argument and one side trying to pull it heavy, one tried pull it light, and that's what I think created the record ultimately the way it did. But it wasn't fun to do because it's not an enjoyable experience fighting with your best friends with our music.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, but you know, we're not the only bands that ever went through that, and I'm always about the end result. And if the end result is something that people really enjoy, then it was worth it. You know?
So I was 15 when Grace of Blue Skies came out. So Drag You Down was my first experience with Finger 11. And since then I've gone back and I'm familiar with the whole discography, but that Drag You Down is what brought me into the world as a fan of Finger 11. And I wanted to ask you about Scott as a singer and as a person. It feels like that's the album where he really came into his own, where you hear this power and this command. What do you love most about him as a singer, as a performer, as a friend, and what makes him so captivating as a frontman, whether it's on record or live?
Yeah, I mean, well, Scott's just one of my favorite human beings alive. Like he's just a wonderful guy. Like me and Scott were friends for years before the band started. We were video game buddies. You know what I mean? Like I would go up to his place. We'd rent 2 or 3 games and we stay up all night playing them, drinking pop and stuff when we were like 14, 15 years old, kind of thing. So, you know, me and Scott have been a lot of friends for a lot of reasons, other than the band for a lot of years. So yeah, but yeah, as a singer, man, he always had a character to his voice, but he's just gotten over the years. He's just found a way to control it and really sort of take it to places I don't think we would ever expect him to be able to do, because when he first started, he was a singer, but he was more of a drummer, to be honest. But we had a better drummer. So we were like, Scott, you've been in theater school, you be the singer. You know what I mean? But and I think that's what makes him such a good frontman, is because he's not the kind of guy that was dying to be a frontman. You know, he's not that kind of guy that, like, a lot of frontmen, they need the attention that the frontmen get.
The ego.
Scott's not like that. You know, he's not like that. He's not looking for the attention, but he does love to sing. You know, Scott loves to sing. He's always singing. He's singing all the time. He just loves singing. So one of the coolest things I think for him is that he found his path and he got to really sort of do nothing but that. And, you know, Scott's not really a musician per se. He doesn't play, like, we write the music, he writes the vocals and lyrics. You know, he's a lyricist and a vocalist. So that's another reason why the bond is so, we're very dependent on each other. You know, like, that's how we make our music. So but he's just gotten the ability to control his voice, and listening to it more now. Like, to me, as a guy who's heard him sing probably more than any other human in the world, because I mix a lot of our demos and stuff, and I hear his voice solo my whole life. His ability to do these subtle controls are really wild now. You know what I mean? He's entered into that next level of vocalist where, you know, he almost sounds like he's not trying, but he's changing notes. So it's just great. I mean, it's just really wonderful. So I think that's something that was, like, he always had a strong voice, but it keeps getting stronger. And the thing that I realized too is that because we started so young, I think there was, when he was younger, he was trying to be a young guy doing a man voice, you know, a big aggressive voice. And now that he's a man, he has way more control over that kind of voice. And he has an ability to pull it off and give a character, you know, when he goes for him. And I mean, he's like maybe second to Mike Patton to me as far as the scream yell of voice. Like, he has that ability to yell in key with character, and I love it. Yeah.
You mentioned that you started as just friends playing video games. Are you still a video game fan? And if so, what are the best games you've played in the last few years? This is for our audience that plays video games.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a game guy no matter what. Video games still for sure, but I just love games in general. I'm a daily Hearthstone player. You know,
nice. The cards.
Yeah, I played that all day long. I also, for many of the last 10 years, I would say I played a lot of Dota 2. Do you know what Dota 2 is?
That's on the computer, like right? That's a PC game.
It's a MOBA, whatever, like a online battle arena.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a real nerdy game, but it's a super fun game. It's like the closest you can get to playing sports in a video game, because it's 5 against 5. It's a fun game. I haven't played that for years though. I had to quit. I literally had to quit. It was too addictive. Right now, I'm a big. I've been playing Ghost of Tsushima, and that game's
open world.
Yeah, open world samurai running around, pretty wild. So yeah, I've always got some game on the go, some one way or the other.
Do you think it's your love of video games and Scott's love of video games that's had so many Finger 11 songs placed in video games, like Guitar Hero and Rock Band and Burnout and all those games? I think some of the snowboard games, it was in there too.
Yeah, 1080 for the GameCube. Yeah, no, man. I don't know I think that was just a thing that was happening at the time, but we were definitely open to it where some other bands weren't. We understood the importance of it because we knew what it was like to game the music and how awesome of an experience that is, you know? And it definitely was cool. Like, I remember, I'll never forget getting the GameCube and getting the 1080. And I don't know if you remember that game, but you could pre-select what songs were in the playlist. So I only selected Finger 11 songs, and I would play to our own songs. I would snowboard on that for hours and hours on the bus. And it was like, this is a dream come true, man. This is like, I'm a gamer and make music, and now I get to play an awesome game that we'll be playing anyway to our music, and it was a really cool experience.
That's amazing. So the next album is the self-titled album, Finger 11, and this is where things start to break big more in the mainstream. So this is a platinum album now in Canada, gold album in the US. Every album has gotten bigger. What does momentum feel like now with the release of that and the first single, Good Times?
Well, it's funny because because that was also our first record with Johnny K. So we had left Arnold, and then at that point we had made our 2 records in North York or Richmond Hill, wherever we were. And this was our first time. Like, now we were in Chicago, living there, making our record with Johnny K, who'd just done Disturbed, and there was this feeling of like, whoa, this is big, and it was an amazing experience making that record. Like, so much fun. Really, that I would say, of all the records, that was definitely the most Finger 11 record. Like, that was the most where every member was contributing the exact same amount. Every member was like having great ideas. There was no fighting. We were all agreement with like all the musical ideas were sort of gelling, and we just were all like, everybody was in a good place. And we had written one thing. So at that point, there was this feeling of like, we have a great song on our record. Even though we hadn't made the record yet, we knew we had written a great song. Again, just us. The label and a lot of other people, except for our friends, didn't really gravitate towards that song until a radio guide came out later and said that we should release it as a single. But we loved it, and we knew it was a risk for us because it was soft, and so we knew what we were about to embark on was a change again for the band, another change. And then when we made that record, man, we were in love with it. We were so in love with it. It was such a cool experience. We went down to LA to mix it, and it was just, we made a couple of records at the what's it called, in Los Angeles, where the Stones used to make their records. I can't remember right now. It was cool studio, and just new experiences all around. And I think that again was reflected in the music. It was still aggressive, but it was more fun, and it was more like upbeat aggressive versus like dark and angry. So but then honestly, man, when we put that record out, Good Times was our first single. In Canada, it went gangbusters. It was huge. We opened for Ozzy right out of the gate, opening across the country, and main support for Ozzy. Like, that in itself is a dream come true, just unbelievable. The song was like number 1 on, like, that was our first like number 1 Much Music countdown song. Like, we loved the video. But in America, they just couldn't understand the change for the band. So we had all this momentum in America and all this excitement and people just waiting for the new Finger 11 song. And when this is sort of a cross story, but when 3 Days Grace released I Hate Everything About You, that's when we started getting calls from all people in the industry telling us, oh, you guys did it, you delivered. Like, they were hearing that song and they thought we came out with this follow-up to Greatest of Blue Skies, and it was a hit because everybody heard that song and knew it was a hit. And we were like, no, we got this song called Good Times, and
we're actually over here. You guys are over there.
That's funny. And we literally got emails from radio stations telling us like, disappointed, was expecting so much more from this band. Can't believe they went this direction. We had wah-wahs on it, and like, songs about good times, and like they were expecting us to come out and be spiky-haired, dark guys with big pants, and they totally rejected it. America totally rejected it. Like, just completely, like as if it didn't get released. I don't think anybody played it. So it was a really weird time because we're over here in Canada with like this crazy success built on what we've been building. But in America, it felt like it just hit a brick wall. And we still got opportunities in America, still got to tour, but it was like, it wasn't going super hot. And then on our head, we're like, we don't have another song on this record that's better than Good Times, like as far as a rocker. So like, what are we going to do? That's when finally someone was like, you guys should just put out one thing. And we were cool with that because we were like, you know what? This isn't working for anybody. Like, we love it, but let's try something else. And like I said, when that song was written, we all were like, "Whoa!" That was one of the first songs in our band's history that I think we felt like it felt like someone else's song. You know, like when we would listen back to one thing, we're like, I can't believe this is our band. Like that was that feeling. Like this feels like it's someone else's song. And then, but then when that went on the radio, it didn't come out gangbusters either because there was
It was
not
a slow
the trend
burner.
that, yeah, it took about a year of them working on that radio. Finally, it did break. And then when it broke huge. And it broke massive for us in the States and in Canada. That just became, so that was like, we were real close to getting dropped before one thing. I mean, if one thing hadn't have succeeded, then we would have definitely got dropped from the stage for sure. But it did. I mean, it did. What can we say? It blew up bigger than we could have ever imagined, and became really what for the first time for the majority of people put the band on the map. Not in Canada necessarily, but definitely in America.
I
So
was I was gonna ask if there was hesitation in releasing one thing, as a band that's known for being heavier to release one thing, but it's cool to hear your explanation of, well, we tried this and it wasn't going there. So let's
yeah,
go completely the other direction and see what happens. And then how surprised were you when it became this massive hit? I mean, it was a slow burner, it took time, but when it hit, it was top 5 on like multiple rock charts. And then more impressively, it was number 16 on the Billboard Hot 100. Like this is number 16 basically in the world, the 16th biggest song when you're talking about the Hot
yeah,
100. It's Justin Bieber, it's everyone, not just rock. So
yeah.
how surprised were you at how big that got?
Well, I think we're definitely surprised. I mean, but again, like being music fans, that's the dream, right? Like to get a song that gets that big, like that's like my dream isn't to become personally famous. My dream is to create something that that reaches the heights that my favorite music reached. And so that was the first time we'd ever really entered into this world of like, holy, this isn't like just our fans anymore. Like this isn't just the people that we've been fortunate enough to expose the music to. Like this now is going gangbusters across, like everybody's hearing it and we're making fans. I remember us selling records at the time, and it kept like records were really important, or CDs, I guess, at the time were really important. That's within the metric, right, of how everybody judges success. So I think we were selling like 1,000 records a week. You know, wow. All of a sudden, it went our the guys. You guys sold like 7,000 records. We're like, no way. The next week, it was like, guys, you guys sold like 11,000 records this week. We were like, what? And then the next week, it was like 17,000 records. And then for like about 8 weeks straight, we sold about 20,000 records a week. And it was like, this is the kind of thing that we had only heard about and watched other bands experience. And it's happening to us. And it was this crazy feeling of like, that was our way of understanding just how far it was reaching, because we were still just playing for our audience every night. We were on a bus. We really didn't have it, and there was no internet, so there wasn't a way of seeing how far it was going other than the radio people telling us and us seeing these results in their record sales. But then it just really, for us, when I realized that song had, it wasn't just that it got popular, it was that it crossed over into the pop genre world. That's when I was like, whoa, I know what kind of songs do that. Popular songs. You know what I mean? That's why it's pop music, right? So when that started happening and we started playing all the TV shows, and that was a trip. That was like, whoa, this is
You mean
crazy.
like the late night shows, or?
Yeah, like late night shows, like, you'd be playing like, Jay Leno and like there's Sylvester Stallone, and then like we did like a Ryan Seacrest USA Top 40, and it's like, it's like just these pop stars all around us, you know what I mean? And we're just like, this is weird. Like we don't like, you get to see like them hit plastic cymbals, and like lip sync and and you're like, whoa, like this is normal to them. And we're gonna go in there and play live, and like that's normal to us. There was no judgment. It was just like, this is a world I don't know about, and we got to go behind the curtain and meet everybody, and everybody was very friendly and very cool, but it wasn't what I knew like a music scene to be like, right? Like it was more of a like a commercial for your music, I guess.
Mm.
But it was still cool. Like we've always played live. We've never lip synced. So to us, that was like our only rule was like, yeah, we'll come play your show, but we get to play, you know? And everybody was always cool. So, but we got to go so many places and meet people out like you never thought you meet because of one thing, because it was such a pop crossover. And at the time, pop was really pop, right? It was like Backstreet Boys and like, you know, just all those kind of people and just that kind of it was like a real pop world. Pop stars were trying to be pop stars.
Yeah,
So if
Britney,
you were a rock band
NSYNC,
that landed
J
in the
Lo.
pop world, yeah, like you were sort of fish out of water a little bit, but it was cool. I mean, I've always enjoyed where my guitar takes me, man. It's been a mind blowing experience.
So we're gonna dive into the next album, Them Versus You Versus Me. Before we do that, I want to take a second to acknowledge your guitar mate, so Mr. James Black. So before we talk about him, I have a funny story. You're talking about video games. Do you remember the app Draw Something? That was like a craze for a while.
Yep.
So back in the day, this app comes out, Draw Something, where you could send a request to your Facebook friends to draw things with you. And you would do your best to draw whatever it says, and your friend has to guess what your drawing is. So I remember playing Draw Something, and suddenly I see I see James Black as an option to request. So I must have I've never talked to him, but I guess I'm friends with him on Facebook. Somehow he accepted my request. So I'm like, oh, why not? You gotta think big, you gotta dream big. So I do the request and he accepts it. So this is what happened. So that he is super talented as an artist. He's super creative. So I send him essentially a stick man that he has to guess what it is. And he sends me back literally like the Mona Lisa of Draw Something, where you don't have to guess. He's drawing exactly what it's supposed to be. It's like a picture he took. So I thought you would get a kick out of that. So that's my history with James Black, is playing Draw Something over and over again, and him probably being severely disappointed with my artistic skills and me being like blown away with what he's capable of.
If I know James, he was probably severely disappointed with his artistic skills, and it was probably blew your mind. Like, you know what I mean? I've seen him draw unbelievable sketches on the back of a pizza box and then throw it in the garbage. You know what I mean? Like, just because he was bored, that's just what he wanted to do. And it was like, dude, that's like someone would kill to own that. That's an amazing piece of artwork. Then the tour manager come back like, get rid of these pizza boxes. Yeah, get in the garbage. It's like, oh, it's wild. I mean, a lot of our T-shirt designs, that he did, the original drawing would have been like not on a typical piece of paper, and we just found a way to get it on a T-shirt. But yeah, no, Jay's probably the most true artist I know in my life. Like genuine, just everything he does has an artistic value to it. He doesn't have a choice. It comes out of him. He's very just, we all have our skill sets, but Jay is like, you could give James anything and he'll make art out of it, and good art, not just something. He's like that. So it's cool. We're lucky to have him.
And what does he mean to you as a person, as kind of a musical partner in crime, as your guitar duo through everything? Rainbow Butt Monkeys, Finger 11, Blackie Jackett Jr., he's there with you the whole way. You mentioned that he was 10 years ahead of you with guitar and was kind of your guitar teacher. What kind of a special place does he have in your heart?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think about it often. I don't even know, I don't know if there's a word to describe it, to be honest. You know what I mean? Like the kind of relationship we have is really one of a kind, really special. You can call it best friends. You can call it soulmates.
You guys are BFFs. Let's be honest, you're BFFs.
We're BFFs, you know what I mean? But it's much more than that on a lot of levels. You know what I mean? And definitely on a creative level, there's just this bond that we have. A lot of that comes from just simply starting together and doing it beside each other for so many years. We can finish each other's sentences, but it's more than that because there's a lot of times where we'll literally be texting each other an idea and it'll be the same idea. That happens all along. And for me and James, that's usually rule number one. Whatever that idea is, we follow it. And that's usually what steers a lot of our creative thoughts. But yeah, no, I mean, like this has been it's been hard being away from the guys this whole past couple of years, man, because we're just so tight. Like we even when we go somewhere on the road, like we literally get there, we tell each other, okay, be done in the lobby in 15 minutes. Then we get back in the lobby together and we go and see a movie together. We're just constantly hanging out. And so, especially me and James, we spend every single second with each other. And yeah, I miss him, man, for sure. But yeah, I mean, I don't know the word to describe our relationship other than just like magical. It's a magical. I don't have it with I make music with other people and I have other bandmates in the same band, but there's something about the way me and James, maybe just because we're both guitar players, maybe because we're just guitar players in the same band, it's like two halves of the same brain. And the other thing is we think differently enough that it's creative. We're not just always agreeing. We have a very healthy way of disagreeing about anything in the world and not taking it personal. So, that's a big part of
it. There are no words in the English language to properly describe what he means to you. That's yeah. I like that. So listening, so I listened probably 3 times. I listened to your entire discography across all your projects, just really soaking it in, audio engineering, headphones, just really, really falling in love with the music all over again. And man, the amount between you and James, the amount of amazing guitar riffs, memorable licks and catchy that. And it's just amazing. And I'm wondering, do you have like an audio app on your phone or a hard drive on your computer that just has all these riffs recorded that you go in and pick out when you make an album, or is everything organic from scratch when you start an album?
It's usually from scratch. Like we do have those. We will have projects that start at home. Like some guy writes a riff and then emails the project through Dropbox to the other guy. Like me and James do that quite a bit. But lately, especially since Steve has been in the band, because he's become a big part of the writing process, we've found that with this lineup, it's most creative and we get the best results when we just wait till we're all in a room together and start from scratch, But I would say, man, talk about hard drive. I would say over the last 10 years, we have so much. I mean, I would say over our career, I would probably bet that we have more unreleased songs than released songs, because we're constantly writing and we're constantly creating, but it doesn't always hit the mark and it doesn't always make everybody happy. So a lot of times it doesn't see the light of day, So we have a really high bar and it seems to be getting higher. That's why it takes longer for us to put out music. But we have this bar that we set for ourselves that if it doesn't get hit for one of us, the music usually doesn't make it out of the hard drive. So but that doesn't stop us from starting the process. There's a lot of music that we wrote over the years that just sitting around not heard right now. But that's not to say it won't get heard one day, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. As far as like I don't know. As far as just I don't know. Yeah, there's music out there. There's music always being made, but doesn't always get released.
I hear you. So you mentioned Steve. So Steve is the drummer that joined the band in about 2013. How do you say his last name? Molela? Molela. So yeah. So he joins the band. This is a few albums. This is after all the albums, I believe. So he joins the band. He adds a new dynamic and a new sound. I actually reached out to him and I have a quote from him. So he says, one of my favorite parts about Rick is how he never wants to just blend in with everything out there. He always wants to try different things, to be a bit left of center, giving the band a sound and identity that no other band has. He's also one of the most fun guys to tour with. So that's from Steve.
Nice.
Some kind words from Steve. What does he bring to the band, and what attracted you guys to him as the newest drummer for the last 8 years or 9 years or something?
So the way he was brought to the band was simply our old manager Rob knew him, and Steve had actually been understudying or being mentored by Arnold Lanning. So he had been in LA for, I think, like 5 years or something like that, making records. And just, I don't know if he was actually engineering or what he was doing in the studio, but he was playing, and he played on some stuff. So he just went to the school of Lanning, basically, right? So he was a fan and knew the music very intimately. So there wasn't a big learning curve for him to come in and play. And when the thing went down with Rich and we didn't have a drummer, we were all just thinking back to the first time and being like, holy fuck, this is going to be a nightmare. There's going to be like 30 more people coming in trying to play, who are we going to find that's going to know our entire catalog? How are we going to, So Rob was like, hey, you guys should give our buddy Steve a shot. And we were like, okay, sure. Sure, why not? We trust Rob, bring him in. And he just was right away. Right, just personality wise, playing wise, everything was just like, yep, you got the gig. Like, it was just messing. But we had just lost a member for after a long relationship, and we were sort of in this situation where the four of us, were eager to make music, just the four of us. We weren't looking for another person to come in and give their opinion and be part of the process. We just wanted to make some music. So he played our live shows, but then when we went to make our great Black Crooked Line record, he stayed home, and we used a guy from down in Nashville,
Chris Powell,
and then, which was great. That was a cool experience in itself because we never had that experience where we had a session guy. But when we got back and we kept touring, the more we would tour, the more we'd hang. Steven as himself is a producer and a writer. And he would play us stuff he was doing and making it, and we were like, oh, this is great. Steven's great. And then little by little, the real friendships bonded, and the real trust was created, and the real respect was found. And that's sort of what allowed us to finally get in a room with him as a writer, because that was like, we didn't want to ruin the relationship by him coming in and not being what we wanted. And then now we're in a situation where we're like, hey, be our drummer, but we don't want you to be our bandmate. So when Steve started writing, it was obvious, not just his skill level and his knowledge and his ability, but just his taste and his enthusiasm and the way he works. It all just gelled. Like we thought it would, but it just took time to build the trust. And and so boom, right away, now it's just like another member. And it's actually back to sort of what I was saying to like maybe the third Finger 11 record, where it was just firing on all cylinders. And it does feel like that, like where all of us are. That's why we stopped making music as individuals and sharing it, because we were like, you know what, this is working when we're all together. So it sucks that obviously the last 2 years we haven't been able to get together, but that is changing, and we've already booked some time at a cottage, and we're going to get together and finish what we started. Because that's the other thing that sucked for everybody. The pandemic sucked, but for us, we had hit a groove, and we were getting together, and we had written about 4 or 5 new songs that were like album worthy, and we wouldn't have taken us more than like 5 or 6 more weeks to finish up what we'd started, and then this happened. So there's a lot of good music, and we just got to finish it.
So there's a Finger 11 fan crew Facebook group that I joined leading up to this to talk with all the fans, to see what, if they were sitting down with you, what questions they would ask. So I have several questions directly from the fans, and one of them has to do with what you're saying right now about before the pandemic hit, you had some new songs and then things get delayed a little bit. So this is from Suzanne Dent Bloomhagen. So she's in that Finger 11 fan crew Facebook group. So she says, You've been hinting at new music for a couple of years now. Any updates? We all want to know when the next album will be out. I know concerts are on hold right now, but are they creating new tunes so we can rock out when this all passes? So before you answer that, normally Finger 11, usually on average, about every 3 years, there's a new album. And then there was a 4 year delay, a 5 year delay, and now it's been about 6 or 7 years. So everyone wants to know. Everyone's eager.
Yeah, I mean, yes. The short answer is yes. I mean, we've actually gone from like cringing about it to laughing about it, and we almost did it again this year. Like I think if you go back and look at our New Year's Eve posts from the last 5 years or 4 years, we say there's new music coming next year.
You're becoming the tool of the Canadian rock industry.
Because we genuinely thought there was, right? And then there was just things got in the way. There was all these problems. And so the short answer is yes. And the reason we always thought that is because, like I was just saying, we've been writing. So we've been writing and writing and writing. But what happens is that something happens, it takes a while, and then what we wrote doesn't feel relevant anymore. We write something new that raises the bar, and that's now. So it's just been in this constant writing cycle. But if in 2020 or 2019, like we had all these releases started lined up, and we had a whole bunch of music ready to go. Not just new music, but some older interpretations, some acoustic releases, some covers, and then everything went bad, and we just said stop it. So we've been writing, but not like, for the most part, for the last 2 years, we haven't been, because we haven't been able to see each other. But individuals have been coming up with ideas, and like I said, there's a strong group of ideas from just before the pandemic, and the second we get together, there'll be another strong group of ideas. And our goal is to have a record out and be touring in the summer. But our band moves at a different pace. I can't tell you why. None of us know why. None of us even sort of enjoy it. It just moves how it moves, and we don't try and get in the way of it. So.
Good things come to those who wait, right?
I think so. Can't really force things. So.
Yeah. So up next, the album "Them Versus You Versus Me" comes out. This is a game-changing album. The first single, "Paralyzer." It's one of the most successful Canadian songs of all time. And I gotta read this sheet very quickly. Some of these stats. So it spent 52 weeks on the charts, which at the time was a record. Number one in Canada and the US, featured in Band Hero, Guitar Hero. The single has sold 3.4 million copies in the US, which is massive. And just recently passed 100 million spins on Spotify. So it's crazy. What does that song mean to you? And could you have ever imagined what kind of a global impact a single song could have?
No. I mean, the song means everything to us. I mean, we're very aware and thankful that song has become probably our legacy. Like, what I mean? And in many ways, it's become bigger than our band will ever become. The band now is attached to the song that's gone to the stratosphere, but the name of the band is, attached to it, where before all our songs were attached to the name of the band, and this is just complete game changer. But no, I mean, like, again, when we wrote that song, there was no question we knew we'd written something in our own universe that was special. Again, we felt that way about other songs, and they didn't do what we thought they would do, or people didn't react the way we thought they would react. But with this song, we were again in a situation where we had the demo. We knew, like, if I put the demo on at a friend's party and no one even knew I switched the music, the place would erupt and dance. Do you know what I mean? Like, the song had a thing. Everybody that heard it wanted to hear it again. It just had a thing to it. And the label was psyched. It was the first time we'd ever put a record out with a label that was wind up being like, okay, we have it. Like, we have the song. Like, there was a plan because we have the song. Radio's waiting for it. I think for me, the biggest relief about Paralyzer initially was because one thing had become so massive and was such a out of our wheelhouse kind of song. The music fan in me was like, we're running the risk of becoming a one-hit wonder for a song that really isn't what the band was historically, And that's a high-class problem, but there was this feeling of like, I want it to be more. I want people to know more about this band than just this one acoustic ballad song. And when we wrote Paralyzer, I think there was that feeling of like, oh man, we may be a 2-hit wonder band, and that's a little bit better than being a 1-hit wonder band. You know, there was this feeling of like, we might actually come out with a follow-up to this song that was bigger than anything we'd ever expected. And then, to be honest, when it got released, I mean, yeah, it was crazy. That was the most like, this is a rock ride. Like, holy moly, like, you know, like that was a goodbye sleep, goodbye everything, you know, just like we're going where this takes us. And it took us all around the world, all kinds of crazy places. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger in the statistic world, you know, just kept getting more and more spins and higher up the charts. Then I think for me, one of the craziest things was at some point it crossed over and it actually charted on the American R&B chart. And I don't think like it charted high, but it charted. And it was just like that.
It's
to me,
you,
like,
you and Usher on that chart, I think.
You know what I mean? Like that's it. But to me, when you're in that moment and it's your song or, you know, your band's song, like it's hard. Perspective's a hard thing to maintain, you know? And when you hear these kind of things, like it cross over to R&B, you start thinking of other songs that do that. And you start thinking like, wow, this has that in common. And that's one of the things that blows me away on Spotify now is there's like, it gets added into these playlists of like my all-time favorite songs. And someone put Paralyzer right there with it. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, Sweet Home Alabama, Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, Welcome to the Jungle, Paralyzer. You know, it's like, is that where it lives now? That's crazy to me. Like that, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, the success of it was just, I mean, and you know, I'll tell you one time we were on the road for about 7 or 8 months and we came home and we all flew home and I rented a car at the airport. And that was a big deal for me. Normally I just get a taxi, but I was like, oh, I'll rent a car, I'll drive it home, you know? And I'm not joking. Paralyzer was playing on every single radio station on the radio, like a part of it. Like I was just, and it was like 4 radio stations. And I was like, because all my friends have been telling me like, dude, I'm getting pretty close to getting sick of this song. It's on all the time, everywhere. And I was like, how could that be? Or, you know, whatever. And when I got in the car and I was like, literally, there's no other song on the radio to listen to than Paralyzer. That was a big wow moment. You know, that was like, I don't know what this is in store for us because everything in our industry works retroactively. The payments come in months, years later, like everything, you know, you don't just see initial results when something has success. You never know how it's going to pan out. But it's been, for all of us as individuals, as a band, that song completely changed our lives. You know?
And the cherry on top is after 7 Juno nominations, that album takes down Rock Album of the Year. So that, I mean, that must be pretty special.
Finally got a Juno. Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, that was a neat feeling for sure. You know, that was pretty crazy. We definitely had one of those moments where we were like, everybody was proud for us. It was our moment. It was our night. You know, there was a lot of like, way to go, Finger 11 kind of feeling in the room because, like you said, it had been our 7th nomination. We'd been doing it for a lot of years at that point, and it was succeeding. Probably the nicest guy with the most like real, genuine happiness for our success was Jim Cuddy. Jim Cuddy was just genuinely like, guys, yeah. He was just like, he's like, you guys deserve this. You've been following you guys, seeing you've been working out for a long time, and you guys, this is a monster song, and it's doing really great. You guys, he just was genuinely like happy for us to see, you know, and it was really cool. One of my favorite quotes was from Chad Kroger. He when we were on tour with them for a couple of shows during that time, and we were on his bus, and he's like laughing. He's like, ha ha. He's like, you guys are gonna have haters now, because up to that point, the only people that really paid attention to our band were people that liked the band, right? He's like, this song is gonna be so big, you're gonna piss people off. And it was like, yeah, it wasn't much after that we started getting people telling us how much our band sucked or our music sucks, you know. And it's like, and it's wild. It's like, that's another achievement. I never thought our band would be big enough to have haters. Like, it's wild.
Yeah, unfortunately for Chad Kroger, he's one of the few people on the planet that can genuinely tell you what it's like to have haters just because you're so good at what you do and you figured out the formula to have hit
Yeah,
after
yeah.
hit for decades, and you just become so big that it's almost a joke. Like it's
And
impossible
and I can
how big the
honestly say,
band
like,
is. They're awesome. I
exactly,
love Nickelback, man. I've seen them.
dude.
I saw them before they were big, opening for Everclear way back in the
Right.
day. I saw them once they were massive with 3 Days Grace opening and Bush opening and Seether opening. I actually love
Right.
Nickelback. So there you go. Confession of 2022. I'm a huge fan. There you go.
Well, I mean, their songs are undeniably massive hits, and their concerts are undeniably packed every night. So you can hate Nickelback if you want, but I can guarantee you, Chad Kroger doesn't care that you hate them, because all he cares about is the thousands and thousands of people that loved it. Do you know what I mean? And the one thing I gotta say about touring with all these bands, like we tour with a lot of music, and I don't always love the bands that we tour with. I don't always love their music, but I can honestly say that if it's a shit band or a good band, the guys in the band love that band as much as you love your band. You know what I mean? They believe in their band as much as you believe in your band. You know what I mean? So you might not like what other guy's doing, but he's only doing it because that's what he thinks is how music should sound, how the world should be, and what, you know. And if there's hundreds of thousands of people that love that, then you should be mature enough to be like, I don't hate the guy for it. You know what I mean? He should be, happy for the guy that he found out a way to express himself. But I don't know, people. It's always been the way though, man. Like, it's always been. I remember being a Chili Pepper fan, and no one knew who they were. And then all of a sudden, Under the Bridge came out, and everybody knew who they were. And I had people who all of a sudden started hating them, and I was like, to me, that just means you never liked them in the first place, because you don't have that option to hate something just because someone else likes it. You know what I mean? If you didn't like it, anyways, yeah, Chad Kroger gets a bad rap, but I don't know. He doesn't. I don't think he cares.
Haters be hating. I
Yeah,
wanted, before we move on to the final two albums, I was just curious how Paralyzer was written. Did it start with that catchy guitar riff? Did it start with the lyrics? Was it the concept of kind of that dance club awkwardness? How did it form?
You know what? It was a total accident. Paralyzer was a total accident. We at that point we were writing all the time, every day. We were getting together in a van, driving to jam space, jamming 5 to 10 hours, driving home, going out the next day. So this particular day we got in the van, I don't remember why, but the vibe was real shit. We were pissy with each other. Someone was late. I can't remember what the reason. We got there, we set up our stuff. We tried to write, we're writing music, and it was just not happening. We were just totally in a shitty mood. So we're like, you know what, let's just call it. Like we have no problem doing that. We're not really clock punchers. So if it's not there, it's not there. So we're packing up our stuff, and we told our buddy Chris Bowman that he could come up and take photos of the session. And literally we're walking down the stairs with our gear, and he pulls in, and we're like, so we're like, Chris, come on. The plan originally was to do like a photo shoot around the place. We just said, listen, well, we're just going to sit up here and jam for like a half hour, and you can take photos. That'll be this photo shoot. And in that half hour, that's what we wrote Paralyzer. And I think we only wrote it because we were fucking around and we were not taking it serious on any level. So we basically wrote the riff. The riff originally started sort of like a Slayer thing. Like it was like, like it was like that kind of like double time thing. And then somewhere in the jamming, it got to that, and then we just sort of came up with the verse as like chords to play, so we could go back to the other thing, But we came up with the pre-chorus, the chorus, and the verse in that half hour. The weirdest thing was that we almost didn't record it. We just, because at that point we were writing so much music, we were just like, oh, there's another thing, and it's sort of silly. So we almost didn't record it. I think it was Rich that was like, we should at least throw this down quick. We did a live take of it. We sent it to Scott. And I think within a couple of days, he wrote all the melody and the words like as they are, because it gave him that dance vibe. He being himself and being a songwriter and a lyricist like he is, he wanted to tell a unique experience. So he told his own experience of how awkward dance clubs are. You know what I mean? So, and then when we heard that back, we're like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then, I think also at the time there was that massive trend of like Franz Ferdinand and like dance rock was sort of really a thing. So it fit right in with that sort of act. Like I think that was more of an accident, but it definitely fit in there. And then that was it. And as soon as the label heard the demo once, it was just like that happened. That happened super fast and super accidental. And it just, once we had it, we felt like we had something. But it wasn't really until Scott came up with the words that we thought the music was special. We knew the riff was catchy, but I don't think we thought it was going to be like it is, like when people sing it all the time.
So this friend that was late for the photo shoot, have you bought him like a bottle of champagne or something for forcing
I
that
don't know.
jam?
We're still friends with him. He's just Bowman. I don't know. We just actually, I think we joke about it all the time, but he's pretty sure he doesn't know where on a hard drive somewhere that he has photos of us writing Paralyzer, which now they'd be interesting. Like at the time, it was just the copy dated pictures, but now he literally has photo documented moments of us writing the riffs for Paralyzer. So cool to have those things. But yeah, no, we're friends with Bowman. Bowman's still a really good friend to all of us.
That's awesome. The world owes Bowman a debt of gratitude.
Yeah. He gets a shout out every time for sure.
Amazing. So before we wrap up with the final two albums, I want to talk about your bass player, Sean, give him a little bit of love. So listening to the discography with the good headphones on, it became apparent to me that the bass is actually something special in Finger 11. It's not just doubling the guitar. It like carves out its own little space. And there's these like tasty, memorable riffs. And I actually took note of some songs. So to me, the bass was amazing in songs like Costume for a Butterball, Shudder, Quicksand, Drag Me Down, Complicated Questions, Good Times, Falling On, Living in a Dream. The bass to me was a very integral part of those songs. What are your thoughts on what Sean brings to the table, and maybe super underrated as a bass player, because I was very impressed hearing everything as a whole.
Yeah, no, I would definitely say Sean is underrated as a bass player and as a person. Sean's one of the greatest human beings to ever live. Man. He's our backbone. Like, he is our, from day one. I mean, he's always been like our father, even though he's not that much older than us. But he's our CEO in our band. Like, he's our business leader. He's our accountant. He's our manager. Like, he's so much behind the scenes. But as a bass player, he's amazing. He's like, I think over the years, he's been probably pressured more than anybody else to try and get it to change his style from either producers, could be me and James, constantly trying to get him to like play with a pick, or back in the day we wanted him to slap bass all the time, and he's a finger fucking monster, but the tone in his fingers is insane, and the speed that he can play, and not just that, his melodies and his bass lines, they're always been special. And that's something that I think is one of my favorite dynamics about our band is the two guitars and the bass. They always are, they're in unison as far as like the world they're living in, but we're always trying to make up different pieces of that world. And Sean has always been just that constant big thing, but like he's a bass player's bass player, right? Like he's sort of like I was saying, Scott's not really a musician who sits around with an acoustic guitar or a piano and say, he's a vocalist, loves to sing, loves to write. Sean is a bass player. He's a bass player. He can play the guitar, but he doesn't sit around trying to learn how to play guitar. He sits around getting better at bass and learning bass lines and learning how to do bass. And I'm so happy for that, because that's what a lot of bands, their bass players are just guitars that didn't fit in or something, where someone just picks it up almost like a necessity, where it's a passion for Sean. I think it comes through in his playing. And his idols too, he comes from that school of like, Bill Wyman and like John Entwistle and those guys that like had those dynamic guitarists, but still needed a way to fit into the song and stand out, with their parts. I think Sean does that really well.
Mm. I'd
Just groove. Yeah.
I'd like to rapid fire through a couple fan questions. I know they'd be disappointed if we didn't get to them. So one of them is from Jesse Bartholomew from the Finger 11 Facebook group. He says, I'd ask him if he could sit down and jam with anyone, living or deceased, who would it be? And how often does he get his hair caught in his strings? LOL.
My hair gets caught. You know what it gets caught in? It gets caught around the strap nut lock there. You know, like the strap. Like my straps are like screwed right into my guitar with a washer. There's no little thing you put the strap on. It's just flush against the coat. You know, but my hair always gets stuck in the washer. Pulls. I put my teeth in my guitar a few times. In my black Strat, there's a dental impression on my front two teeth, right in my guitar. So yeah, so my guitar has damaged my body many times. I think Neil Young
Neil
would be
Young.
my answer. I would love to be in a room with Neil Young, and I don't care if we jam or just smoke a joint, but I'd love to be there. And yeah, Neil Young, I think he'd be the most fun to jam.
Amazing. I've been a judge for the Juno Awards. I've worked the Junos before, and normally I'm not starstruck. But one year I was working the Junos, and my job was to move the celebrities from where they arrive to their own room, and then taking them on stage when they're performing or on TV. And at one point, I was in a room. I turn around and I was right here with Neil Young. I just didn't get a heads up that Neil Young was there.
Right.
So I turned right into Neil Young, and there's Neil Young. And you think of just the musical history, like going back in time to everything this man has done, the world that shifted around him. You know, I remember hearing Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. They said that between all of them, they had written 800 songs, and 500 of them were just Neil Young. So
Yeah,
that's my
amazing.
little moment of being in the
I've
same room
never,
with
you
Neil
know, what,
Young.
I've never even been in the same room with him. He's my idol. Like, just uh, not just his songwriting and his playing, but his approach on how to be a musician and how to exist in the music industry. Like, I think everything about him is pretty fascinating.
Being authentic to himself, and doing things for the
Yeah,
love of music, and
yeah.
not taking shit from anybody. So one more fan question. So this is from Megan Port. She says, what struck me about seeing them in concert was the opening acts were so energetic, and then Finger 11 came on, and they had such a powerful presence that commanded the room. How would you say your performances have changed from when you first started in the band?
Um, well, I think at the very beginning, especially Butt Monkeys, it was just like unbridled energy. Like we didn't even know how to control it. It was literally just like you know atoms bouncing around a stage. It was just craziness, and it was manic, chaotic. I think over time we found a way to like control all that energy and be more deliberate in our performances. And there's been we've had a few breakthroughs over the years of mental breakthroughs, so you realize something early. We also got a chance to, a lot of the years we were opening for Creed and Evanescence, and so we were getting to like learn how to be a band, but on stadium-sized stages. So we had room to stretch out and literally do that kind of stuff. We had to fill up the space somehow because we didn't have backdrops and we didn't have scrims and we didn't have stage gear. We had to fill up all these big stadium stages with our bodies, our movements. So over the years, we definitely have found a way to get more deliberate with our performances. And then now I think it's just a natural flow of energy and performance. I think it's just become what we do and how we, like, I don't think we think much about it. I think we look forward to it. None of us ever get nervous. It's a favorite place to be. It's the place I feel most comfortable in the world. So I enjoy being up on stage.
So the last two albums, Turns Electric and Five Crooked Lines, when those come out, are you feeling the pressure post Paralyzer and the success of that album and that single? Are you feeling just a ton of pressure to recreate that, or do you feel like you kind of have free reign now, like you've had that success and you can do what you want moving forward?
I think there was a little bit of both, to be honest. There was definitely pressure. Music at that time was very like single oriented. Like iTunes was out, like it was very much about the song. So I can say for sure on Life Turns Electric, we adopted like a pop rock kind of mentality to the songwriting. There was like I don't think any song's over 4 minutes long. You know, everything's very concise and like straight to the point. There's not a lot of downtime in the songs. I can honestly say that's what we were going for at the time. When I hear that record, there's some good songs on it. There's some songs where I feel like we missed the mark, and I think but we actually got to do that record ourselves, produce it ourselves. We didn't have anybody in the studio telling us what to do, so we did have an A&R guy that was heavily involved on that record, but we did have a lot of fun making that record. Just started just doing whatever we wanted to do, you know. But I don't know if we have I don't know if we never were really concerned with following our own thing. Like that's why we never made Greatest Blue Skies again. It's why we just didn't try and write another one thing after one thing. It's not really how we approach making music. So when we were making that record, we were aware of how big Paralyzer was. But Paralyzer was still obviously Paralyzer was still probably big enough to not have to worry about it because it was unless whatever. So we just made that record with the 10 rock songs we had. I like that record. One thing I love about Life Turns Electric is it's sonically probably our best sounding record. Like it was mixed by Chris Lord-Alge. Living in a Dream was produced by Rich Costey. Like, those were massive mixers, and they made that record sound like a big dumb rock record, which was what we were going for. At that point in our lives too, we were really heavily into classic rock. Like really listened to a lot of classic rock when we made Life Turns Electric, and I think you can hear it in the records.
I found that Five Crooked Lines was quite a bit heavier than the previous two albums. Do you agree with that? And if so, what do you think accounts for that aggression? And Rick, why were you so angry in 2015?
Why was I angry? I don't know. Was I angry?
No, I'm just saying for the aggression that came through on that album, just the heavier album.
Well, I think there was a bit of like just wanting to go back to our roots as far as guitar players and riffs and that kind of thing, definitely a desire to be less polished than the last record that we just made. And no one was watching us make that record again. So we sort of were free to do whatever we want. And there was definitely no single-minded songwriting on that record. Everything was just what it was. The songs came out however they were going to come out. So, but I think, just a desire to be heavy again was probably just a natural, like, guitar player thing. I was tired of playing power chords and chunking away on the guitar. I was like, let's write some riffs. And I think that record, like Save Your Breath, to me is like, people keep asking us to write heavy music, and I feel like it's like if you listen to a song called Save Your Breath on Five Crooked Lines, I don't know if we're going to write a heavier song than that ever again in our lives. Like, that's the heavy, as far as how Scott screams and yells and how low the guitars are tuned, and it's just like, I don't know what people are looking for, but that to me is one of the heaviest songs we've written. And Come On Oblivion is one of my favorite songs we've ever written. I feel like that's a song we've been trying to write for a long time.
I actually love the first single, the Wolves Indoors. I really like that album as a whole, Five Crooked Lines. But that first single, I thought, has that edge going back to Grace of Blue Skies or the self-titled album.
I agree with you. And so one of the cool things about that record too is that we did it with Dave Cobb, and I don't know if you know who Dave Cobb is, but at the time he was just becoming really well known because he had done what's the name of that band?
Can you name any other music?
Sons is the second word. Rival Sons.
Okay.
So he had just put out a Rival Sons record, which was like a big classic rock sounding like 70s thing. And he had just put out Sturgill Simpson.
Nice.
So we were all blown away by that Sturgill Simpson record. We're like, whoa, look what this guy can do with country music, Let's go see if it'll work with us, and we'll do to our rock music. We'll get him to take us out of our comfort zone and put us somewhere else. And that's what he did. But that was a cool experience, man. We made that record really fast. we had done a lot of writing, so a lot of the songs had been written, but the recording and the approach and a lot of the vocals, a lot of last minute tweaks made that record really special. So, and then right after we left, I remember him saying, "Wait till you hear this record I'm making with this guy named Chris Stapleton, man, it's killer." And I was like, "Oh, that'll be cool, man. I can't look forward to it." And ever since, I think since we worked with him, he's won like 11 Grammys. He's produced like Brandy Carlisle, John Prine. You know, like he's just superstar now, man. I still text him once in a while, but he's a good dude, and he's a real just a musical monster. Such a talented guy. I think he just did a couple songs with that band, the Crownlands or Crownlands, whatever. So yeah, but
Amazing.
that record was what we were looking to make when we made it. We just wanted something that was not attempting to be a pop rock record, you know.
So we've gone well over 2 hours already. I mean, time flies. Time flies when you're having fun. I did want to touch on Blackie Jackett Jr. because I really enjoyed the album, the 2018 album that you have on streaming services. Are you okay for a few questions about Blackie Jackett Jr. and then
Absolutely.
we'll wrap it up? Awesome.
Yeah, sure.
So this is a side project with you and James Black in the band and some other musicians. Is it kind of cathartic to have another avenue to create music that doesn't have to fit the mold of Finger 11?
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, that's how it started. To be honest, that's just where it started from. We were on the road a lot. We started relating to the music. We started writing and listening to a lot of old 60s and 70s country music, Townes Van Zandt, and that universe, poetic country about living a hard living lifestyle. And at the time we were drinking so heavily, drinking so much whiskey, and we were touring like constantly and just barely sleeping and partying all the time. And talking about this kind of music sort of spoke to us. And once we started writing it for fun, which is how it started. Blackie Jackett Jr. originally was the idea of like a guy, like this guy that lived this crazy lifestyle. We would write songs sort of in his brain. But we sort of quickly learned that the songs we thought we were making up about a made-up guy were exactly our lives, the lives we were living. So we just said, all right, let's just keep writing. He's not really a guy. That'll just be the name of the band. And we started writing, and the songs started. They were fun, and one thing that was really cool about it was that in Finger 11, Scott's the lyricist. So this gave me and James a chance to write lyrics and tell stories and write, our thoughts. And because the music so obviously would never apply to Finger 11, it gave us a lot of freedom to just try whatever we wanted, right? And that became just a daily thing. And we both fell in love with it, like heavily, just it's really rewarding. It's a lot of fun. We got a single coming out next year from Blackie Jackett.
Amazing. Where did the comedic element to the songs come in? I mean, my two favorite songs are Bender, which has the comedic element, and then To See Your Face Again, which isn't comedic. It's a little sad, but there's kind of a chain of comedic elements going through the album, the 2018 album anyways. Where does that come from?
I think just there's a style of country that had that. And I don't know if you know who Shel Silverstein is, but he was in like Dr. Hook, but he's a songwriter, and he's got a real sense of humor to he's the guy who wrote like A Boy Named Sue, the Johnny Cash covered.
Yeah.
So he's just that kind of, there's a sense of humor to his poignant country music, Townes Van Zandt's another guy who's got a sense of humor to him. And then just, it allowed us also to write really heartfelt thoughts without taking it too seriously, And it was a theory. There's like a Hank Williams Sr. That's what he always thought. He was trying to write like the funny pages. Like he thought songs should be as clear and to understand as like a 3-part comic, But then he would be trying to write about his real life, which was full of turmoil and chaos because of his alcohol use and his drug use. So there was just this kind of like approach of like, let's use humor to deliver these really sad subjects, really, if you think about it, And then over time, it took on a world of its own, and there's another guy named Roger Miller, He's a great songwriter. He wrote like King of the Road. But he's another guy who's always used humor to really hit home these sad things. So that was a big part of it.
How nice was it to win that Hamilton Music Award for best country album on your first release with this new project? I mean, there's so much success with Finger 11, but then something brand new, it's completely different.
Yeah, it's wild, man. I mean, honestly, for anybody to even know that band exists, let alone win an award for it, blows my mind. Like, it just started off as such a joke. Not like a joke like we thought it was stupid, just like it's stuff that is so much fun and ridiculousness. I never thought it would ever see the light of day. And then when it got signed, and then we got released, and then we put records out, and people listened to it. Now we got fans around the world. We get messages from Denmark and Germany, and it's just sure, man. It's just a good reminder. It's worth trying because you just never know where it could end up. You know?
So one final fan question. This is from Mike Dunn. He says, ask him if he still keeps in contact with Randall the Midget, and if so, why hasn't he shown up on a Blackie Jackett Junior record playing the washboard? So I feel like there's an inside joke there that I'm not privy to.
I feel like there is too. I feel like I might not remember who Randall the Midget was. But maybe James would. I wish he was here right now.
Maybe that's a joke for James then.
That's the one thing about all of us. Our collective brains make up a lot of the memories. So unless we're all together, it's hard for us to piece together memories. You know, even the way we tell stories, we're so used to like bouncing off each other. Even when we tell stories, I'll be telling a story and I'll be like, man, this is usually when Sean jumps in. You know what I mean? Or this is usually when James jumps in. I can't remember that part of the story because that's usually there. Anyway, so the Randall the Midget, I'm not sure if he ever does appear again. Sure, throw him on a Blackie Jackett record. We put everything else on there. So
yeah, I did a Google search. I did a Google search to see who that was, and it's an actor, a successful actor that's in a bunch of movies. So I'm not too sure. I'll ask James what the connection is.
Yeah, I wonder, man. I wonder. I also want to say that the two other guys or people in Blackie Jackett Jr., Jimmy Reed, Sandra D, they're just as important as me and James. Making that music is awesome.
Amazing. Powerful shout out. What would you say, looking back on your 30 plus year career in the music industry, what would you say you're most grateful for?
Your career in the music industry, I guess, I mean, to be able to keep doing it, there was definitely a point where we were only trying to succeed enough to make another record, and now to be at this point in my life and in my age and just sort of to be able to look back and be like, wow, that worked. And now we've made a career out of it. And we have what we've already accomplished can't be taken away from us. So it's like, that's a nice feeling. I mean, we've accomplished more than we ever thought we would. So the rest is really just gravy to us. And we still love doing it. So I don't know. I guess that would be my genuine answer is the ability to still be able to do it with my best friends in the same band that we started. That's it's in itself is a blessing. So
that's amazing. Final question. If you could go back in time and you could sit down next to your 10-year-old self. So there's cute little 10-year-old Rick Jackett sitting beside you. If you could whisper advice in his ear after 30 years of experience and memories and a journey and mentorship and all these things, if you could just whisper some advice that would help little baby Rick Jackett, can we call him Ricky? If we could help him along the way, what advice would you give him?
I don't know, man. Maybe, I don't know. I wouldn't want to mess with it. You know what I mean? I wouldn't want to mess with the timeline. Like, what if I said something and then it messed, like,
you become an accountant or something?
Like, what if I told him to practice more and then I did practice more, and because I played better guitar, I didn't write a certain riff that was only available to me because of my limited skill? I don't know what I would say to him. Probably what I would say to him was like, stay away from cigarettes, man. I don't even smoke anymore. but I did for a long time. And that was one of the only real regrets in my life, that I wish I just never started smoking cigarettes. You know, that'd be my most genuine. The other thing I would just be like, make sure to enjoy it. That's what I said. I'd be like, just always enjoy it, you know, which I feel like I have tried to. So
amazing. That's good advice. Well, hey, Rick, thank you so much for your time. It's probably been closer to 2.5 hours or more than that at this point. So I really appreciate it. As I mentioned, I'm a massive Finger 11 fan, going back to the time when this is like 21 years ago or something. And it means a lot to be able to talk to you. And you know, I do this for the listeners. I do this for the Finger 11 fans, but part of this is me as a super fan. I just got to sit down with a member from one of my favorite bands and really pick his brain and ask the questions that I want to know myself. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, my pleasure, man. You know what? I think that's what made it a great conversation, because I enjoy that too. I like talking about things. I'm proud of it, you know, and we all are. And it's nice to talk to someone who has appreciated it as much as you have over the years. So I really appreciate it too, man.
Amazing. Thanks, brother. All right. To all our listeners, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
All right. Take it easy.
I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I'd love to hear from you guys. My goal is to grow this podcast organically, where you're giving me feedback on topics you'd like me to cover and guests you'd like me to interview. You can reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Joel Martin Mastery. Joel is Joel, and on Twitter at Joel Mastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.